Oh, look who it is. The pride of Saskatchewan. It is the gorgeous and talented Kara McIver. She has arrived, people. She has arrived. There she is. Let's give her a little shot there. Hi, Dave. There it is. There it is. Hi there, stunning Helena. How are you? Good to have you here. All right. We are about 45 seconds away from launching. The guy beside me, literally right there. Right there. No, right there. There. Alex Mistretta, the international man of mystery. Yes, he does his best work when he's half naked. But not tonight. It's all good. What kind of glass is that?
Irish Whisk.
From the mountains of central British Columbia to you listening around the world, this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. We welcome you to tonight's show on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on TalkStream Live, Revolution Radio, and KPNL. All of our archives are free by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Tonight's show is brought to you by Chive Charities. Help make the world 10% happier by visiting Chive Charities today. You can find them on our website. All right, Alex Mistretta is one of the few full-time professional investigators in the paranormal field. He is the former MUFON Los Angeles Director of Investigations, founder of Phenomena Research, co-founder of the UFO and Paranormal Research Society of Los Angeles, and former member of Big Cats in Britain. Following his studies in anthropology and psychology at the University of Illinois, Chicago, Alex has devoted his life to research into the paranormal, UFOs, hidden history, and cryptozoology. This man is also a part of TESSA, the Experiencer Support Association. He's hanging out with a lot of Canadians. I don't know why, but he is, and he's one of the good guys. And the only silly thing about Alex is he surfs. You know what happens when you go in the ocean, people? Sharks eat you. You know, they look at Alex. He's thin. He's like 6'4". He's like 108 pounds. That's it. Okay? So there's no meat on the bones there. So he's safe every time he heads out into the Pacific with the great whites to go catch a wave. But the main thing is he survived, he's here, and we're talking some monsters and dinosaurs tonight. Alex, how you doing, buddy?
Great, man. Thanks a lot for having me on. That's the best intro I've heard for a while.
Yes. Now, one thing I love about your research is two things. Number one, you're very forward. We may not agree on everything, but you're very forward and you're very direct with what you feel this field needs in order to prove a lot of this stuff. But number two, you're not afraid to go into those heavy discussions on how to get things done, how to work them properly, how to make things going. Before we get into all of that, why did you decide, an educated guy, you've got a scientific kind of background, why did you decide to really get into UFOs, ghosts, Bigfoot, Mokili Mbembe, which we're going to get into later on?
It's actually backwards. I actually went into psychology and anthropology because of the paranormal and cryptozoology. So I went into psychology because I wanted to have a good base for ufology and the paranormal, right? Because before you go into parapsychology, you kind of got to know the basics. And anthropology, obviously, because of cryptozoology. So I had interest in those fields prior to that, based on, some experience I've had as a kid and just interest in this field since I was like 6 years old, So I literally went to college specifically with this field in mind. So,
really, what?
Absolutely.
Out of all the times we've talked, I've never heard that.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. Yeah, actually, I never really never really mentioned it because it's kind of unusual, I guess, and no one really thinks about it. But yeah, I mean, 100%. That was my sole purpose to go to college, and mine sports. But
Okay, so why did you want to direct your college education to a realm that nothing has been proven?
because I like to make life difficult for myself, I mean, honestly, there's days where I think, man, if I could go back, I would just stay away from this field entirely because I didn't think it would be this difficult to make it work. I thought initially that if I could get, a degree or a couple degrees or whatever, I'd be able to have a little more juice and I'd be able to kind of bridge the gap between academia, science, and people in this field and in this field in general. And I thought I would get a lot more respect than I ended up getting by, being able to kind of walk right in between. So, because my philosophy has always been everything can be answered. Everything, everything can be proven. Everything can be documented if you just kind of find the right angle, So, but I didn't realize that both academia and science on one side and the paranormal on the other side weren't all that thrilled with that approach, and a lot of people don't really want answers for a variety of reasons, So, I regret it a little bit at times, to be honest, but it's it's what it is.
That brings up a good point. Why do you think so many people in this field don't have aspirations for true answers to what is going on?
Partly, I think there's a fear aspect. Answers are scary because all of a sudden, if you have somebody like myself who is arrogant enough or cocky enough to say they can get answers, all of a sudden everything becomes very real. You can't hide anymore behind, it's not just an internet conversation anymore. It's not just Google, Bigfoot, Google chupacabras, Google aliens. It becomes very real. And I think there's an innate fear of the unknown that even people in this field, and I think unfortunately, it also attracts a lot of very non-progressive personalities. We've kind of found out, the last few years. And those people just, kind of want to look back. They don't want to go forward. It's just like, again, maybe it's based on fear. It's based on maybe feeling inferior on some level because maybe they don't have an education or they've been bullied. And all of a sudden they've kind of found a community where they can be accepted, right, by being in a paranormal. It's kind of like a bunch of outsiders kind of get together. And I understand that 100%, So I think when somebody comes along and starts challenging that position where, starts saying people on the outside, academia, science, whoever has made fun of you all these years is actually just as worthy to be part of this conversation as we are, I think that becomes a bit of a challenge, I think, to some people, And I'm not the most diplomatic person in the world, as you know. So, and so I think part of that is because I found myself, I found myself so often kind of stuck in the middle and getting angry with, both sides.
Well, you bring up a good point because this also gets into the entire politics of all of these fields. And it doesn't matter whether it's UFOs, whether it's ghosts. I think a lot of those politics are based on whether or not people really want answers in this field. I mean, you have people out there such as yourself or Ross Allison or number of other people out there who are looking for the answers to these most outrageous questions of monsters, ghosts, aliens. And then you have your thrill seekers. The thrill seekers aren't really there for answers. And I love it when the thrill seekers talk about, well, we got to go get evidence. We got to go get evidence. And they have no friggin' clue what they're going to do with that evidence. Nothing. Yeah. And I see your point. But this is where the game gets quite political. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, 100%. I sort of compare it to as you know, I ski a lot, and when we go out on these trips, I used to go out with a bunch of friends. It'd be like 7 or 8 of us would go out for a week, and there's people that love skiing, love the process. We're there early in the morning, ski all day, go out of bounds, climb, ski down some chutes. And there's people that love the idea of skiing. So they like to go down a little bit easy, talk about it, go to the bar and talk to the girls, And I think we have the same phenomena in this field. There's a lot of guys like the idea of being investigators because it's cool and, and it's safe on YouTube. It's safe, going from conference to conference. It's safe staying behind a keyboard, but very few actually want to go out there. And on top of that, very few have done the work to be able to go out there and do quality work, and have not enough of a knowledge background to be able to do it. And with social media, it doesn't matter anymore. As long as you talk really loud, you scream the loudest, you have the most amount of clicks and likes. It doesn't matter if you've actually done the work or if you know what you're doing. And I think, and now people can't tell these two modalities apart, so.
Are there answers out there, though?
100%. I firmly believe everything can be answered. We might have to expound upon everything that we know to get them. We might have to take science and research a whole other level. And I'm not saying we can all get them initially, but I firmly believe everything can be answered, because if you don't feel that way, I don't see the point of going out there and trying.
Okay, so let's look into that for a little bit, because we can both agree that there's many in the field who claim they want answers, but really they're not conducting anything scientific. They're conducting opinion. And I think that's dangerous. Whether you're into the woo or whether you're into the scientific fact, if you're eliminating anything before you've actually researched it, you haven't conducted anything scientific. That's my opinion on it. All right? And, over the years of doing this show, that's how I have kind of come to that conclusion. But, Alex, for those who are looking for the thrill, is there anything wrong with people just wanting to go on a ghost hunt and, maybe get tapped on the shoulder or get pinched or get shoved or catch a photograph of a shadow person or a ghost?
Oh, not at all. I think it's great. I think people should be able to enjoy the paranormal in any way that they want, But there's just different ways to do it. I mean, you get to differentiate between just like going out, having a good time, having fun, and the social aspect of this. And I enjoy it too. I like to go ghost hunting, with buddies or whatever, go out there looking for UFOs and, but like if I take a tourist trip, I don't call it research, If you take a tourist trip to go to the pyramids, you're not doing pyramid research. You're just taking a trip, somewhere where there's, pyramids, or if you take a tour to go, ghost hunting for now, you're not really doing research. You're just taking a tour. And I think we have to differentiate between the people. And it doesn't mean that one's better than the other. It's just different. It's just two very different things. We have to understand that research is a very different animal to just going out and having a good time.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. It's like, when I used to do our haunted tours at the local museum, we weren't there to solve any mysteries. We were there to give people a good time and raise money for the museum. That was the focus. That was the goal. And hopefully the spirits would come out and play and understand. That's why we would go into every building before the tour and we would literally say, hey guys, we have a tour tonight. This is to help keep your home safe and keep your home funded. Help us out. Give us a little bit, And we would do that. It was about respect for the field and for those who haven't crossed over and decided to stick around for a while.
And you can educate people too on what things really are, and once you're in the field or in a haunted environment or whatever, and sometimes it's just okay to just have fun, I mean, I do it too, but I just, like as I was saying, I differentiate between when I do that and when I do, bona fide hardcore research. So.
Mm-hmm. One of the reasons why we wanted to bring you on tonight, because I want to get into a lot of monsters with you tonight, man. I do. And I think you're one of the top guys out there who is not only looking for what everyone else is looking for, like Bigfoot or ghosts. You're out there looking for the weird stuff. If there's something weird out there, whether it's people still seeing dinosaurs, whether it's Mokele Mbembe in Africa, or pterodactyls flying around the coastlines of Western North America right through down to Texas, you're on it. You're on board. Why do you go after those real strange ones that people say they're having occurrences with?
I don't know. I like things that other people aren't that interested in, I guess. Things that don't get enough attention. It's like, maybe it comes from my athletic background, where I know for those that don't know, most people know me as a volleyball player, but I was actually a fencer and a team handball player, two sports that very few people do. And, and I think so I like that. I remember I was obviously much better at fencing and volleyball, but I like doing those things that other people aren't that interested in. I just think I like to bring attention to things that don't get enough attention. For whatever reason, it's always been something that's been real interesting to me, so... And I can't really tell you why, to be honest. It's just part of my personality, I guess. And I think, also I think when so many people does Bigfoot, and it's obviously proven to be something really, really hard to get, definite evidence for. And I like to focus on, like, for example, when we talk Bigfoot, I like to focus on stuff in Central Asia or the Caucasus Mountains in Russia, because very few people are out there. So perhaps there's a better chance to get evidence at a spot like that where there's very few people actually doing any kind of work, So I think that's the other side of that too.
Got a question from Filth here. Why is he wearing a shirt?
Well, I've actually been in talks with, which is something that happens to me once in a while. Usually it doesn't go anywhere, but with funding, sort of thing. So I was hoping that I look a little more as like a guy that's actually looking for serious funding than some dude without his shirt off yelling.
Now, there is a side joke to this that we should let a lot of people in. And I kind of caused a little bit of a storm with that, because if Alex and I have been friends for a long time, and when you look through a bunch of his pictures, he always seemed to be posting pictures of him playing volleyball with a shirt off, or surfing with a shirt off, or doing, lounging on his couch with a shirt off. And it just, it killed me, because, I would never do that. I mean, I'm a little chunky in certain areas. And so anyways, here's Alex, Mr. Beachbody, walking around, hey, ladies, hey, guys, look at me, I'm Alex, and so I used to bug him about that. And it's just continued.
Yeah, kind of that got started years ago. By the way, you just mentioned the ladies. I got no game, if I'm going to be honest with it. But years ago, I was in talk to do a documentary, and because I did a lot of adventure sports, like bodyboarding, I bodyboard more than surf, free dive or ski, whatever. They were going to do a show with me, half investigating, strange stuff and half like extreme sports. So that whole image with the shirt off and hey, bro, kind of, got started with that a little bit.
Well, it looks good on you. It looks good to see you actually fully clothed tonight. That's nice. Appreciate that. But let's get into this. There's a lot of people in here who really have had experiences seeing monsters. Okay? Monsters that we can't explain. Monsters that were supposed to be dead millions of years ago. And yet, there's people still claiming to have these sightings. Little raptors running around Texas. Miniature Tyrannosaurus rexes have been spotted. Thunderbirds, going back 30, 40, 50,000 years. 40-foot wingspan being seen. Pterodactyls. Sea monsters. From the Loch Ness Monster to the Cadborosaurus. I mean, they're everywhere, these reports. Is this topic just romantic because we want to still have a tie to the past to all these amazing creatures that humanity will never see live, or is it something else?
I think our interest in it is romantic, but I think a lot of them have a very real basis in biology once you really kind of get into it. Not all, obviously. Not everything's going to turn out to be real, but I think, our interest is romantic, but I think it's a really real, bona fide objectivity, real to these animals. So,
but if they're supposed to be extinct, okay, Loch Ness Monster, for instance, or even Ogopogo here in British Columbia, if they're supposed to be extinct, what are people seeing? Or what are they confusing themselves with a creature that, or an animal or mammal that we know is in existence today? Give you an example. With Ogopogo, I want to believe it's a sea monster. But I also know that Okanagan Lake is the start of the Columbia River. The Columbia River, much like the Fraser River here in British Columbia, has a massive amount of very large white sturgeon that could grow up to 20 feet long, the size of a great white shark. Okay, they can surface and it causes ripples. They can get very big. They can be aggressive. They can be very dormant. And we know that they spawn in Okanagan Lake. So this is where I get a little bit confused. If for most of these creatures, is our mind projecting what they are, or is it actually a live creature that people aren't recognizing? Because the majority of people out there, Alex, even if they've been boating on Okanagan Lake or other sea monster lakes, they're not used to seeing sturgeon.
Well, I think yes and no. Like, obviously, there's a lot of lake monsters around the world, right? You go in Scotland, you go from Loch Ness to Loch Morar, which is kind of next door. I mean, you have them in Sweden, you have them in Iceland, you have them in Siberia. So I think we're dealing with more than just one type of species. 100%, some of these lakes are sturgeons, who incidentally is a prehistoric animal, right? Sturgeon's been around for millions of years. So, when we say prehistoric, people tend to think, well, it's something that's extinct, but that's not necessarily true. There's a plethora of animals alive today that were around during the time of the dinosaurs, so prior to that, or before the Ice Age or whatever. So, but Ogopogo, obviously, to me, because of the description of it, is not a sturgeon. Whatever it might be, it seems very similar to me to Caddy, right? Cadbosaurus that you get, that's not all that far away. So that one I tend to lean a little bit more to being a real kind of an unknown species, for example, where even a mammal, to me it says mammal, to be honest with you. I don't think it's a dinosaur. I don't think it's a prehistoric animal. To me, I think if it exists, it's a mammal, as is Caddy. I mean, the swimming motion, the up and down is very mammalian. The fact that it's been witnessed, kind of spraying out of its head like a whale. So I think it depends on which location you're talking about. But I do agree, though. It's, lakes are finite bodies of water, so it becomes any more problematic for a large animal to be able to stay hidden for so long, So, but some of them, I think, like the Lagerflod worm in Iceland, I like a lot in terms of, a known animal. The Storjord, which I can't pronounce, in Sweden, I like a lot as being something very different. Loch Ness, I'm on the fence a little bit about. Couple lakes in Siberia, I'm pretty good about maybe being some unknown animals, But so I think it all depends on where you go.
See, if we're getting into the Siberian area of Russia, where there's still a large portion of Russia that has not been seriously looked at. I still think, and maybe it's romantic of me to think this, I still think somewhere in Russia there's still a pack of mammoths walking
There's
around
sightings. There has been sightings. In fact, not so much lately. I heard of one from 1997, saying I don't know how reliable it is, but I do know that in the early 1900s, hunters are talking about these hairy elephants they used to see in Siberia, and the locals used to call them mountains of meat. So I don't, the chance of them still being around today is obviously kind of slim, even though if you look at Siberia, especially Yakutia, for example, it's virtually unexplored. Nobody lives there. Nobody goes there. I mean, you can have 1,000 mammoths in there and no one would see them for years, Doesn't mean they're there, but it's not completely out of the possibility. I mean, if you think mammoths went extinct, 4,000 years ago, at least on islands, maybe 10,000 on the mainland, right? So it's geological time. That's like yesterday,
Well, there's a good point that I think they could still be there. Maybe not a large population,
right,
but maybe enough to stay hidden.
Yeah, I think it's a possibility. I think it's a worthy, it's worthy of study. And I've always kind of talked about hopefully one day getting an expedition out of Siberia for that, and other things are out there. But
well, on that note, what we're going to do, Alex, is we're going to get you to hold on. We're going to go to break here at the bottom of the hour. Alex Mistretta, the international man of mystery when it comes to investigating everything weird and strange. We're going to get into Mokele Mbembe. Is there a dinosaur still roaming the rivers of the Congo? This is a story that's very close to Alex. We'll get into it next on the mighty SOR. Right at the beginning there, dude, I totally mistimed myself. I thought we had like 30 seconds left. And I'm like, oh no! No, why is the music playing? And oh well, whatever. Dirty Filth, thank you so much for that super chat, man. Really appreciate that. Remember, everybody, that if Dirty Filth runs our bookings along with the gorgeous Emily Bigelow, so if you have any guest suggestions, just go in there, type in on email, type in bookings at spacedoutradio.com, and let them know who you want to see on the show or what topics you want us to talk about, and we'll try and track someone down. Hey, Nicholas, how you doing, man? Good to see you. And Eva, how are you? And who else is doing here? Let's see here. Aaron, good to have you here. That was a quick half hour, man.
Yeah, it went by so quick.
Dude, totally. All of a sudden I saw this flashing on my screen, and that's my 1 minute countdown. And I'm like, really? Already? Son of a gun.
That's a good sign, though. I mean, it's going well.
Yeah.
Because, man, I've been on some shows when you're like, wait, how much time is left? How much time is left?
I remember about 4 years ago, I don't even remember the show it was. I went on one show as a guest, and literally it was, this person was so excited to talk to me. Instead of interviewing me, it was cut me off after every 15 seconds to tell me their experience, and I was like, and I had committed to like 90 minutes to doing this, man. It was the longest 90 minutes of my life. Delic Flower, welcome to our chat room. Thank you so much. Another newbie, Suzanne Fitzgerald, is here, everyone, from the beautiful state of Texas. We get a lot of Texans listening to this show. I think it's fantastic. Mitchell Darling, welcome to the show. The Richard Elmore has arrived, everyone. The Richard Elmore. Yeah, we haven't had William Jevning on in a long time, probably 3 years. Probably due for him. All right, we've got about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, Alex.
Yeah, no worries, man.
We have done a Dogman only episode with Jody Cook. We've done a few of them.
I listened to part of that one.
Yeah, we can talk some Dogman tonight. We can talk everything. Still can't believe you got a shirt on.
Yeah, that's the first time all day, actually.
Oh, man. Cutest thing happened today, man. Hi, Boots here. Hi, Chris GP. Hi, Virgil. How are you, man? Cutest thing happened today. So my little guy, hi, Soldier Warden, him and his buddy who lives 2 doors down, literally the last day of school, they had a falling out. You know, in one of those little kid spats. So I'm thinking, okay, what can I do with my little guy today? I got the day off of my daytime job. So I figured, you know what? I'm going to surprise him. We're going to go down to the hardware store. We're going to buy like 70 feet worth of plastic and make a slip and slide. You know? And literally I'm like, okay, buddy, like we're going to go in like 5 minutes, and the door knocks, and it's the other neighbor kids. And they're like, can Colby come out and play? And I'm like, yeah, of course. I said, Colby, do you want to play or do you want to go to town? He's like, I want to play. And just then, the boy from 2 doors down comes walking onto the driveway, and he goes, I said, hey, Bryce, how you doing? And he goes, I think I'd like to be friends with Colby again. I miss playing with him. And so I called Colby, and Colby comes outside, and he's like, I'm like, hey, Bryce is here. What do you think? And big smile on his face. He's like, hi, Bryce. And he's like, Dad, can I go out and play with my friends? Yes, son, go out and play. So here I am doing laundry all day while my kid is swimming in their pool 2 doors down, you know, And it was awesome. It turned out to be fantastic. We're going to go here in about 10 seconds. Big thank you to Dirty Filth, to Adam, and to Ed for the awesome super chats. Hi, Robert Moore. How you doing? Good to have you here. Gorgeous Jean Beckett. Nice to see you. Ross Smith, thanks for coming on in. Solar Warden, Mitch Darling, 416, the gorgeous Jessica McCreary. Here we go. Second half hour of Spaced Out Radio is underway tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears wherever you are in this beautiful planet we call Earth. Want to remind you that if you missed portions of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. We continue on tonight with Alex Mistretta. He is a researcher out of Los Angeles, California, looking into everything weird and strange. And we're going to go into the jungles of the Congo here, where many people believe that there are still dinosaurs roaming around. The animal is called Mokele Mbembe, and this is a special one for Alex. And if you're on our YouTube channel, you can actually see Alex wearing a shirt of Mokele Mbembe. I want that shirt, by the way. Totally want that shirt. Alex, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thanks again for having me on, man.
What is Mokele Mbembe?
Well, it's this guy, right? It's an animal in the Congo and in neighborhood countries that looks like a sauropod dinosaur. It was first... I remember what I just said. It looks like a sauropod dinosaur. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a sauropod dinosaur. So people in the West first started hearing about it in the 1700s, and during, a lot of the missionaries were down there and were coming back with stories of this huge footprints they would find, in the jungle, that sort of thing. And then little by little, people started talking about it, and then there's a few sightings, and there's some expeditions, a few more sightings, and then personally, I found a book from a professor from University of Chicago when I was in college. I was in the library doing a paper, and I saw this book that says Mokele Mbembe, the lost dinosaur of the Congo, so, and that's how I got into it. I saw the book and never brought it back, stole it technically, and I've been obsessed with it ever since. But so first, let me set the stage a little bit when with the whole dinosaur thing. So people think dinosaur things that's something that went extinct 65 million years ago, and that's true, but it's not. If you look at different types of dinosaurs, sauropod and theropods. Theropods are dinosaurs that are still alive today in the form of birds. They share some common ancestry with modern birds. So technically, dinosaurs didn't completely go extinct. So from a biological standpoint, it's entirely possible that another different species of dinosaur, another type of dinosaur, managed to survive in a very remote region, and after 65 million years of very limited evolution, turned out to be Mokele Mbembe. And that seems to be the prevalent theory in terms of, or hypothesis, I should say, in terms of what Mokele Mbembe might be. I'm not sold, to be honest, on the whole dinosaur thing. I know that sounds crazy for somebody who's so sure that this animal exists. And part of the reason I'm so sure is because I received firsthand testimony from people in the Congo that have seen this animal. A few years ago, I spent 2 years working in an expedition that eventually never got off the ground because of the Civil War. And so I had people in the Congo and in the neighborhood looking into Mokele Mbembe, and I had some firsthand report from fishermen that were on the rivers early in the morning, and we would see this animal come out of the water to kind of eat breakfast, so to speak. And the other thing too is I want to mention is the Congo Basin. For those who are not aware, it's 1.2 million square miles. It's bigger than Alaska. Most of it's unexplored. There's areas where no one's ever gone. It's huge. It also has a lot of prehistoric species, like the lungfish, for example, which is a fish that can actually walk on land, and it actually predates dinosaurs. So, and it's also what's called a center of endemism, where a lot of species in that in the Congo Basin exists nowhere else on the planet. So if there's a place on the planet where it makes sense from a biological standpoint to have an animal like Mokere membe, this is the place.
Okay. So when was the last sighting of this creature that we know of?
A couple years ago.
And what happened there?
There was, I don't have a lot of details. There's these French guys called Michel Ballot and a couple other guys whose names I can't remember right off the bat. But anyway, they've been doing most of the work in the region recently. And there's some American engineers that were down there building, whatever they were building, a bridge or something. And they were pretty deep out in the jungle. And one of them actually saw the animal come out of the water and, go on land. So that was the last sighting, I believe. That had to be 2018, 2017 maybe it was. I'd have to look it up. I didn't write it down. But so it's pretty recent.
Okay, so what does this creature look like?
So think, so it's got a body about the size of a hippo, kind of a round body, 4 legs. It's a quadruped. In fact, it leaves tracks. They're contrary to what skeptics will tell you, they don't look like elephant tracks. They don't look like hippo tracks. They don't look like rhino tracks. They're very kind of specific. They're actually comparable to sauropod tracks, for whatever that's worth. So a big body the size of a hippo. It's got a very long, powerful tail, which is what the fishermen actually fear because, according to them, it swings its tail back and forth when it gets agitated. And when it gets scared, the boat comes too close. It has a long neck and a small reptilian-looking head. So think kind of like Nessie, but a quadruped.
So if we were to draw it out like a miniature brontosaurus.
Absolutely, yeah. 100%, yeah.
So when you're talking the size of a hippopotamus body, I mean, that's not a big creature.
No, but it, 30 feet maybe altogether, right? It's not, I think, it's a, when species come to one environment and in a very secluded area and aren't found, all over the place when they're endemic to one area, there's something called insular dwarfism, where species tend to shrink. So you wouldn't expect this animal to be that huge. And there's a number of reasons for that. So it's what happens is usually prey get bigger and predators shrink, which kind of, so you have more of a balance between prey and predator. So, and also obviously it's easier to stay hidden. If you're smaller, you leave less tracks in the environment. And, so it's not enormous, but it's big enough that, hippo elephant size is still a pretty big animal.
Okay, so are these creatures only seen in the Congo jungles?
I believe so today. In fact, so everyone's focused on a place called Lake Tele, which is in the middle of the Congo. And years ago when I was going to go down there, that was a place I was going to focus on myself. Until people from the area told me that they're only there partial months of the year. So I had a hypothesis that perhaps only the female of the species that go to Lake Tele maybe to give birth during the summer. And also because the sightings there actually have smaller animals than further north and east. North and east, or was it west? Further west, I'm sorry. So, and then they started telling me about these pools of water further in the jungle past Lake Tele where these animals actually are. And those are places nobody goes to because it's just swamp water. It's basically impossible to get there. But little by little, as the years went on, there's less and less sightings in those areas. Like even the pygmies that live in the area used to talk about Mokere membe, and eventually started talking about them less and less. Now it's like my grandfather saw these animals, or my father saw these animals. They don't see them as much. However, sightings started increasing in lower Cameroon and in Gabon. So if you look at a map, there's the Congo, and you'll have kind of Cameroon up here and Gabon right beneath it. And there's another area down there. There's a river called the Ja River that kind of connects the Congo, goes up to Cameroon. And past a certain point on the Ja River is where people are starting having these sightings of these animals. And they're a little bit bigger there than they were in the actual Congo. There's a waterfall there, and that's kind of like usually the last spot usually people end up going. Beyond that, there's poachers that tend to be down there. It's a little more dangerous. But in terms of tribes, there's no tribe that lives past that waterfall. And it's obviously hard to get to, but we think that that's where these animals actually are today. And there's been sightings elsewhere, like in Malaysia, in South America, but like Percy Fawcett, for example, the famous explorer, talked about these animals in South America, but I haven't heard anything recent in other parts of the world. So
Are they aggressive? And
Yes.
And the reason why I ask that is, a lot of creatures in Africa are known for their territorialism, their aggressiveness towards anything human. The sound of boats will set them off. Literally anything will set them off. Are they man eaters? Are they aggressive towards humans and other animals?
They're very aggressive and territorial, according to the fishermen and some of the locals and the pygmies. But they're vegetarian. Their favorite food, again, according to reports that I got and what other people got, is a thing called the malumbo fruit, which grows on the side of the river. So, like I said, these animals are quadruped and spend some time in the jungle, but they're apparently excellent swimmers, including underwater swimmers. And so they use the river systems to get around. And most of the tracks will be found on the side of the rivers. And Michel Ballot, for example, the explorer I talked about, he showed some pictures of a bunch of tracks kind of going around in a circle and going near the river, where there's some of the malumbo fruit. So presumably this was a spot where the animals eat. But 100% vegetarian, but extremely territorial and aggressive. And like I was saying, they tend to defend themselves with their tail on the water, at least according to the fishermen. And that's why they tend to not go near these animals. They're very afraid of them.
Do they see them more so in the water than in the jungles?
Well, nobody goes in the jungles. The only people that go that far, there's literally, if you go to the Ja River, apparently there's only one little town, pretty far in the jungle. And it's, obviously it's pretty primitive kind of town. So the only way to really get around is through the river systems, right? To come in and out of those regions. Nobody goes in the jungles because there's really no reason to go in the jungles unless you're hunting for animals. And even then, you don't go that far out. It's so impenetrable and it's so deep and it's so dark. And and like I said, since there's no villages in a lot of those areas, we don't really know how much time they spend out of the water. So pretty much all the sightings have taken place near the river systems.
How big are the footprints?
They're about a little bigger than hippo footprints. So we're talking, 3-4 feet across.
That's pretty big.
It's pretty big, yeah.
That's pretty big. Now, the fact that this is in the Congo, and the Congo is one of those unfortunate countries that always seems to be in civil war and has a lot of tribal factions always fighting, and there's a big hatred there towards a lot of construction and modernizing the country to bring it up to a 21st century global type of country. And there's a lot of people who still want to live like it's 1699, to quote Prince's song, right? And that is one of the biggest issues that we see in this. I mean, I have a friend of mine who used to run big heavy-duty cranes, and he was offered like a $200,000 a year job to go run cranes in the Congo while they're building bridges and everything. But, I mean, he had an armed bodyguard service and everything, because at any time you could be hit with mortars or rockets or machine gun fire from a lot of these tribal warlords and their armies, and especially if you were white, there was a good chance you weren't going to survive. So that type of political strife really has to play wonders on any type of research regarding this creature.
Oh, absolutely. It's tough. Like I told you, I spent 2 years putting this expedition together until finally the production company pulled the plug. I spent 2 months. I was in Paris for 2 months waiting to go, waiting for things to kind of come down in the Congo because of the civil war and all that, And luckily, we had some contact with this police department, perhaps some ex-CIA people out in the region. So we had managed to get a lot of armed guards if we were going to go, But the problem with that, too, is one day your armed guards are your armed guards, the next day they're freedom fighters, It changes so quickly down there, and so that's always a concern. And also the problem with the river system is there's these bandits, for lack of a better word, that just kind of travel the river system and, basically shoot on sight, It's not yet. It's really hard to get money to go because everybody's afraid that you're going to die and you're going to waste their money, So, I mean, we had it right, though. We had two Mi-26 helicopters, big helicopters to get around. We had a submersible. We had, and I mean, we had the whole deal. But we're talking $500,000 budget at that point, $1 million maybe, So it's a huge risk to have, to put up that kind of money for investors for you to run a real expedition, I mean, those French guys are doing fantastic work with very limited resources, but they're also down there doing conservation work, and that's how they're able, to get money and be able to go down to the region. Even then, they're limited to how far they can go in the jungle. Because the other thing too, at some point you're going to get sick. You can't, we can't survive in that environment. There's only so much canned food you can bring. There's only so much water you can boil or whatever. At some point, you're going to get sick. You're not going to feel well, and that's been an issue to a lot of these expeditions as well. You can only spend so much time down there safely, So it would require multiple trips ultimately to do this right and pinpoint a location. And again, it's between the dangers and the wild animals and the diseases, it's a tough spot to get to. But it's worth it. There's more than Mokelumene down there.
Plus, the rivers have a lot of dangers to them. The rivers are very fast, rapidy, muddy. They have a lot of really strange-looking fish. I mean, if anybody has seen River Monsters with Jeremy Wade, that one fish that has like tiger's teeth, I forget what they call it. It's thought to be a man-eater. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in those waters that could kill you, man.
I mean, basically, it's everything wants to kill you, when you get down there, and that's the problem, So, I mean, look at the Congo River. It's the deepest river in the world. A lot of it you can't, it's so wild, it's so dangerous that, nobody goes on there. So, it's it's a tough region to get into. And the Ja River, again, it's not like anybody really goes up there, so we don't really even know how safe a lot of those areas really are, But I still think that getting to the spot is the most dangerous part of the expedition. Once you get out in the middle of absolutely nowhere, at least you don't have as much of the human problem. You don't have as much, other people with machine guns. Yeah, you have some poachers, but if you don't interfere with them, you don't bug them, they're probably not going to bug you, but hopefully. So I think once you get far enough, then all you have is the wildlife you have to worry about and the diseases. You don't have the human factor.
When you talk diseases, we're talking things like malaria.
I'm talking like Ebola or, things we don't even know exist yet probably. But yeah, malaria, whatever, just anything. You can just get sick from food, There are a lot of people. The last expedition, I believe, one of the guys had to be helicoptered out at some point. But imagine there's no hospital down there, right? So once you're sick, you got to come back until you can go to a place you can get a helicopter. So it gets complicated. But yeah, he was sick. I think it was just from eating something that's bad, which is usually, I think, the biggest problem is food. Getting clean food, especially for us, right? We haven't evolved, to eat, anything that's not, clean, so to speak.
You know what? You bring up a good point. My cousin, who is a doctor, he's a disease specialist, and he has literally lectured all over the world about infectious diseases, including COVID. And long story short, I remember him telling me right when COVID broke out, he reminded me very eloquently, as he does. He's like, Dave, he goes, humans are not meant to travel. That's why we are segregated by oceans. So the human body in North America is not prepared for the jungles of Southeast Asia or Africa. And their bodies are not prepared for what goes on in North America. And we forget that because we have this curious nature that we want to see, we want to explore, we want to see these sights that we've only seen on television or in movies. And that's what piques our curiosity of seeing lions in the wild or great white sharks underwater or Mokele Mbembe in the Congo. And that's where we get into trouble as humans with these diseases, like you said.
I mean, I've been in France where I had a friend, an American friend, that got sick just from eating cheese because the body's not used to eating something that's that strong, and smells that strongly, right? So, and that's, and that's not that far from what we eat here. But yeah, you're right. We're not used to eating something so, things are foreign to us, especially, and we're talking about, you have to eat you have to eat, you have to eat food with bugs in them. In the Congo, that's kind of part of the deal. You can't keep your food clean. It's insects all the time, So, and sure, it sounds disgusting, but that's the least of your problem. The problem is your body's got to be able to digest all that, and not,
The fact that fishermen are seeing this, how do we know it's not crocodiles? How do we know it's not snakes like giant pythons? How do we know it's not hippopotamuses?
Well, generally, for one thing, I tend to respect usually, local populations in terms of they know what their animals are. This is something so much bigger than a crocodile or a snake and so different from a physiological standpoint that, you'd sort of have to be a complete idiot to mistake an alligator or, a boa for Mokiria Membe. And, so just from that standpoint, I think it's different enough that you can't mistake it for anything else. And again, it doesn't mean it's a dinosaur, however. Through convergent evolution, you can very well have a mammal that develop traits very similar to dinosaurs, or a reptile that can develop traits very similar to a dinosaur, But the one thing, though, in 2018, so the dinosaur hypothesis, unfortunately, has kind of been hijacked by a lot of young Earth creationists. That's the group that believe the Earth is 6,000 years old, which obviously is completely ridiculous, And that's kind of, and the problem with that, and it's kind of embarrassed the Mokere Membe field a little bit. And I'm pretty sensitive to that. And that's part, I think, one of the reason I deviate a little bit from the dinosaur hypothesis. Also, prior to 2018, there's very few fossils of sauropod dinosaurs in Africa. Now, however, in 2018, they found Mensurosaurus in Egypt, which was a sauropod that the exact same size as Mokere Membe. It looks exactly like Mokere Membe. So that gets a little bit intriguing from that standpoint, So then the hypothesis would be that as Egypt and Northern Africa got drier throughout the millenniums and all that, the species would have migrated towards the Congo, where they found a place of refuge and managed to, survive down there with other endemic species and other prehistoric species like, crocodiles and the lungfish. So, that would be the mechanism where the dinosaurs hypothesis would be possible. Obviously not because the Earth is, 6,000 years old, obviously. But.
Okay, so the fact that this creature is seen, maybe once, twice a year?
At most. Sometimes you don't hear about anything for years. But again, there's nobody down there looking for it, or there's an expedition every 3 or 4 years and very few people live down there. So,
what do we think it lives off of?
In terms of food, you mean?
Yes.
Well, they're pretty sure it's a vegetarian. So, the Malumbo fruit that's all over along the river systems. It's very possible it eats fish, though. You could still be vegetarian and eat fish at the same time as some other animals do it. Vegetation, mostly. So, there's a hypothesis that it hibernates during the winter. Some people have noticed this huge kind of like built-in caves that looks like an animal burrowed on the side of some of the river systems. And so some people have hypothesized that perhaps they hibernate during the winter, which reduces, obviously, the load on the environment and it doesn't require as much food year-round. But, there's enough vegetation and, fruit and whatever for it to survive easily.
Oh, definitely. So do you think that with 30 seconds to go that there is like a tunnel system that maybe they use? Because that's the hypothesis for Ogopogo and other sea monsters up here.
No, I think it's too big, and I don't think it navigates well enough. It's too bulky, I think, to navigate through a tunnel system. I think it hides there, it hibernates in those tunnels, but it doesn't have to. It just, it's such a good swimmer that's underwater that it stays hidden, by just swimming underwater and then coming out and it goes into dark forest and there's nobody there anyway. So,
all right, Alex, I'm going to get you right to hold on right there, because in hour number 2 we will bring in questions from our audience. And we will continue the talk on Mokele Mbembe and other strange dinosaur-like creatures that are allegedly roaming around the world. Do you believe dinosaurs still exist? Does Megalodon still exist? I think Megalodon's out there somewhere. I really do believe so. But we're going to hit them all up with our great guest tonight, Alex Mistretta. Stay tuned. We have more Spaced Out Radio with Hour 2 coming up right after this. All right, brother, we are clear.
Cool.
Uh-huh. I'm just going to run my dogs outside. I'll be right back, okay?
Yeah, no worries.
I'm just going to put you on mute here. Be right back, everybody. Hi, gorgeous Alicia. How are you? All right, brother. I am back. Let me just get my phone plugged in and get you unmuted here if I can find my mouse. There it is. And good evening, gorgeous Kira. How are you? Nice to see you. And who else has joined us? Levi Metzger, welcome to the channel. Thank you so much for taking the time. You know, it feels really good. We got three of my favorites in here tonight. Rye Guy, Fapster, and Vinny. I know that makes for a good night. Oob to Joe's Maine. Plays a mean mandolin. Love the mandolin. And, yeah, I think that's it. Unless I'm missing some people here. What are you eating there? Look at you, wheat thins guy. Hey, there's Super Ben from UFO Garage. Had a great show before ours tonight. If you haven't signed up for their channel, make sure you do at UFO Garage. They're encroaching on 2,000. Let's see if we can get the Spaced Out Radio crowd to push them over 2,000 followers. If you haven't subscribed already, go to youtube.com/UFO Garage. And let's make it happen. Let's get our listeners to push them over 2,000 by the end of the night, if you don't mind. Hi, gorgeous, not another Heather. And we're going to get going here in about 10 seconds. Thank you to Jeremy, to Dirty Filth, Adam, and Ed. It's a great way to support this show with super chats. Here we go, everyone.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show.
Here we go with hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears wherever you are on this beautiful planet we call Earth. We want to remind you that you can listen to us on our terrestrial affiliates around North America and digitally on TalkStream Live, Revolution Radio, and KPNL. All of our archives are free by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Kelter. Kelter is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram, Spaced Out Radio Show. We continue on tonight with Alex Mistretta. We're talking Mokele Mbembe. Is there dinosaurs still living in the heart of Africa? Are there dinosaurs still roaming this planet, flying around, walking around, swimming in our lakes and oceans? Alex, welcome back.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. All right. We also, in hour 2, like to include some audience questions here, if you don't mind here, man. And let's go to Bombshell Bomber, who is asking, apparently they're starting a band in our chat room, and she's wondering if you play any instruments and want to be in the hometown Spaced Out Radio band.
No, sadly, I play no instrument, and I cannot sing at all. It's horrible.
I bet you play a mean tambourine or something. Or a
I
triangle.
play kielbasa.
There you go. Works for us. Works for us. All right. This dinosaur, Mokele Mbembe, or whatever it may be, is it wrong to call it a dinosaur?
No, I mean, it's what it's called. Like Mothman's called Mothman. It's not a moth, man. It's the term used. I kind of tend to stay away from it because of the stigma associated with it, but that's usually how people refer to it, so I'm okay with it.
All right. So this creature is said to be aggressive, huge footprints that are seen in the mud. Has there been any video or photographic evidence of this?
There's one really crappy picture, which I'm not even sure it's Mokele Mbembe. It took place in 1992. A Japanese film crew flew over Lake Tele, and they took a picture of, and obviously they're in a plane, so they're pretty up high, of, it looks like a long body that's walking on the lake. Lake Tele is really shallow. That's walking on the lake with, the neck and kind of long neck and a small head, but I'm not even convinced it's Mokele Mbembe, but it's a cool photograph, but that's it. Everything else has been fake, so there's a lot of pictures of footprints from expeditions, and on the river, especially in this place called forget the full name of the space. It ends with something Abe, which means bee, in off the Ja River. There's been a few pictures there of mysterious footprints, huge footprints there, but otherwise not really.
Now, are those footprints fresh, or are they?
They were fresh when they took him. When they took him, yeah.
Weird. Okay, so with the fact that there are fresh footprints that are being found, I mean, this almost sounds like a Bigfoot type of creature, that it's allegedly there. People have seen it. You got to take their word for it. There's no video evidence. Is there audio evidence? Do we know what it sounds like?
There is one. I think it's a fake, though. If I'm gonna be honest, there's one audio evidence of some guy that claims to have recorded its call. It's but otherwise not really. I can tell you what it sounds like, though. It's been described sounding like it's this big booming voice that people hear, and that's kind of what the audio sounds like. But it was a questionable individual named Reguster, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, that made a lot of claims and not a lot of proof. So it's probably fake. So no, not really. And I know what people think. I agree, it's a problem, and it doesn't speak to the veracity of Mukene Membe. But again, you kind of have to remember that it's one expedition every 5 years, or 3 years or whatever that goes down there. So, and most of them don't even reach that far out in the jungle. So,
okay, so if we look at the fact that let's say it does exist,
yeah,
why do we not have any trail cams out there? Why do we not have any video cameras that can be tripped by movement in these so-called hotspot areas?
To my knowledge, no one's ever tried to set up camera traps in the region, to be honest. So all the expeditions have been from the ground. Now the Japanese, kind of flew over the place, and the most recent ones have all been, by a little boat up the Ja River. And to my knowledge, none of them have gotten far enough, I think, to start setting up camera traps where the animal allegedly lived. I think most of the encounters that we've had so far, in most of the area people have focused on, have been part of the animal's range. Perhaps when it goes out, looking for food or whatever. I don't think anyone's actually even reached far enough in the jungle yet where these animals would live. So it's something that we talked about, when I was organizing my expedition, and this was kind of like, this was what year is this? 2021? So over 15, 17 years ago, whatever. So we didn't quite have the technology we have today in terms of camera trap and all that. So we're talking about filming from the air. But yeah, something that absolutely needs to be done. But again, it's the problem of getting to the spot,
Absolutely, and I can totally see where you're going with that, because I mean, if you can't get there, and it's hard to get there due to the tribal factions and everything that kind of goes along with that. I mean, it's easy to say, why don't we use today's technology? But if you can't get in there, it's hard to get that technology set up. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I have a plethora of ideas of what we could be doing down there, but we're talking about setting up using technology to get evidence, but it's going to require a lot of money, because first you have to be on site a minimum of 2 weeks if you can stay healthy and safe for 2 weeks to 3 weeks, right? More than that, you start taking your chances. I think personally, our best chance though is to use environmental DNA. So for those that are not aware, I don't know if you guys remember the story a few months ago where the what's the Bigfoot show that was kind of popular with the scientist?
Finding Bigfoot?
No, no, the better one. But anyway, so they've been using something called environmental DNA, which means that you can test. It was used on a Yeti expedition in Bhutan also for years ago. It means you can test the water. You can actually test the footprints for DNA. You don't need an actual biological sample anymore. It's called environmental DNA. And they managed to get some, in Bhutan, for example, they got some DNA that says 99.9% human, but not completely human. So anyway, the point is, I think our best bet is to use that kind of genetic technology out in the river system, if we can find footprints, out where, if you can see bite marks, for example, or whatever, where there's a malumbo fruit or where we think it might be eating. And we might get lucky that way in terms of getting, genetic DNA. I think environmental DNA is brand new. You know, you can even do it through the air now. They're working on, you can actually get DNA through the air. It's a brand new technology. It's going to revolutionize what we do in cryptozoology. And I think that, plus you're right, the camera trap, you know, infrared so you can film through the jungle at night, whatever, LiDAR, whatever you want to use. I think all those things combined is what we really need. But again, that takes expertise, that takes a lot of money, and that takes time. And, you know, all those things have to come together.
Has there ever been any findings of scat?
No, not to my knowledge. I've asked, and you know, I've looked around, and no one, to my knowledge, have ever reported scat or, you know, anything of that nature. No, so far it's only been footprints and sightings. That's it.
Now, the people of the Congo, and this kind of leads to Jeff's comment here.
Yeah.
Would you be all right with people tramping through your land? The people of the Congo, do they want outsiders investigating this creature?
They don't seem to really care a whole lot because the fishermen hate Mokele-Mbembe because, and they don't have so many encounters anymore, but the problem is, as it was relayed to me, was that it was interfering with their fishing. You know, and that's why I didn't like the animal. Same thing with the pygmies. They thought it was a story of the pygmies that set up a trap and actually killed one many years ago because they don't like these animals because they're aggressive, they're scared of them, and it interferes with their, you know, with their fishing. But again, once you start going in Cameroon, where I was saying the majority, I think, of this species exists, and we start going up the Ja River, where the sightings are at and where these animals are allegedly at, where I think they're at, nobody lives there. Nobody owns that land. There's no tribes. There's no known people to live there, so they don't really care. You know, it's not like you're, you know, and it's not like Bigfoot where you have to go on a reservation occasionally, right? And it becomes kind of iffy about, do you belong there? Should you be there? You know, do you have the right to interfere with, you know, what belongs to them, essentially? This is a very different thing where Mokele-Mbembe is so remote and out of the way that nobody down there really objects to, you know. And you have to realize the environment, too. Their most concern is day-to-day survival in a lot of these, you know, in a lot of these areas, you know. So I personally, I think it would be very beneficial because I think if we can, there's a huge problem of biodiversity loss today, right? We can see a lot of species going extinct, and that affects the hunting for some of these tribes, that affects the fishing or whatever, and that affects the environment. It's almost catastrophic in some of these areas, more so in the Amazon than the Congo, but it's a problem down there too. And I think if we were able to make discoveries in relation to Mokele-Mbembe or the other mysterious animals in the region, one's called Chipekwe and some of the other animals, we'd be able to actually preserve the area, and actually we'd be able to bring attention in the area and start helping out from an ecological standpoint, you know, and maybe helping out some of the people down there that are, you know, they're living under very difficult conditions, you know. So I think it would be beneficial, at least for the Congo Basin.
Yeah, but you think if this creature were to be proven, that would help out a very lacking tourism industry.
Yeah, well, obviously that's something that's always the fight. I think it's too remote and too dangerous for the tourist industry to really, really take hold, you know. And I think if you can, you know, you can isolate the area and, you know, you make it illegal, people actually go down there without a permit, because it would become then a preserved area, right? To preserve wildlife. At least that would be my goal. So you would not let people actually go down there. You'd say no to tourism. You'd say no to whatever. You know, you'd want to preserve the area, because you got to think about it, right? You're looking at a very unusual animal. If it's a dinosaur, it survived 65 million years against all odds. If it's not a dinosaur, if it's a mammal or a reptile, it still finds very unusual adaptations, and it's found ways to stay hidden. It's found ways to survive against all odds, right? And we can learn so much from that, and help us in terms of saving a lot of, you know, species that are on the brink of extinction. If we can learn from this animal how it managed to stay hidden, how it managed to survive. You know, there's so much to learn from it that can help us literally save the world. As I know that sounds grandiose, but I think biodiversity loss, it's such an issue with us today that any unknown, special, mysterious species that you can find, something you can learn from them. and you can apply that to, the ecology and the world at large, and I think at least my hope would be that we go in that direction, and not so much where, woohoo, Jurassic Park, let's bring in, the fat Americans and have a hot dog stand and, let them take pictures of Mokele Membe. So
give Mokele Mbembe some freedom.
Yeah. So, I realize that's somewhat idealistic, and I realize 100% that on some level it's an excuse that I have because I want to find it so badly. So there's a selfish aspect to this, 100%. I'll admit to it, but I firmly believe that we could use these discoveries and what we find in that region, because this is a real lost world. Because we're not just talking about Mokele Membe, and we can apply that elsewhere. And I really think it'd be really beneficial to to the world at large.
Okay, so has anybody, whether it's locals, hunters, or even poachers, claimed to have shot this creature?
Yeah, just the pygmies in areas. And this was back in the Lake Taylor area, so this is not the Cameroon Ja River area. Claimed to have killed one many, many years ago because, again, it was interfering with their fishing, so they got pissed off and they built a trap and they killed it and they ate it. And as the story is told, now you have to remember, in that region, the stories don't get written down. It's all passed through oral tradition, from generation to generation. So this is the stories they're telling about their grandparents or whatever, right? So that apparently everybody died that actually ate the animal. They were, died of poisoning.
No kidding.
Yeah, at least that's the story, yeah.
Incredible. Alex Mistretta is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. So as we wrap it up on this topic of the conversation, if you were to set up a team to go into the Congo and actually look for this creature, what is necessary to do that?
What is this what do you mean? In terms of equipment or in terms of
equipment, time of year, everything? How many people would you need? Probably
at least. So you'd want, obviously, you want soldiers, right? Because you want a lot of protection. You need a geneticist. You need a biologist. You need a guide that's already been down there, or at least close to it. You need someone that understands the wildlife and how to navigate, those areas. So, at least 10, 15 people, realistically, and but you would need. You need a, 2-3 boats, right, to be able to get an area. You need a helicopter. You would need camera traps, infrared. You'd be able to film at night. I wouldn't even mind. Like originally, we had a glider, so you'd have something silent that could fly over the jungle and get night footage.
Like a drone.
Yeah, because ultimately you want to narrow it down, right? So the first trip you'd go for about 2 weeks, and then you'd probably come back home, and you'd have to go back another 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and little by little, I think you can start narrowing it down. So we're talking, maybe $1 million, 15 people. It's quite an enterprise. So
is that money still available for topics like this? Because even though it's a sexy topic, there's a big risk that nothing is going to be found for $1 million.
Yeah, it's a huge risk. Agreed. Yeah, there is and there isn't. Like I know I've been in talks 3 times with private millionaires or billionaires, whatever, that were considering funding, my work and all that stuff. But every time I have a tendency to kind of, it never really closes. So there is and there isn't. I think there's interest, but it's a risk. But that's science, that's exploration, that's research, and I'm afraid that, and I see this, and this is a more of a philosophical topic, but in America, we seem to have lost that sense of exploration, that sense of wonder, And I think a topic like this could be so beneficial to reignite our love of nature, our love of expedition, of exploration, of the unknown. That we lost that by looking at our phones and being on YouTube all day, and and instead of idolizing nature and being concerned about the world, we idolize politicians. So, and I think it's such an important subject. I think, like I said, not just for biodiversity loss, and for the environment, but I think just from a philosophical standpoint. I think it's such a worthy enterprise, and I firmly believe, I think for probably a little more than $1 million ultimately, because of how many trips it would take, 5 years, 5 to 8 years, I guarantee we would find Mokele Membe. 100%.
Or be able to prove that it doesn't exist.
Or prove that it exists, yeah. Like I said, obviously, environmental DNA is such a huge, huge goal because if you can, even if you don't find the actual animal, if you go down there and prove that there's this DNA of this unknown animal, whether it's Mokele Membe or it's the other mysterious animals in the region, the Chipekwe or whatever, it all of a sudden the interest just multiplies, right? And you can get more funding, more money, and more interest, and maybe better geneticists, better biologists that's going to come along. It's going to be interested in the enterprise, and you can start partnering. Then once you can prove there's a biological reality to this animal, you can start having partnership with like ecological causes, and people are already down there doing work, and through this partnership, you can increase your funding and the time that you spend down there, and and you get to know. And a lot of people are doing ecological work, for example. They get to know a lot of the locals a lot better, and you get to know the secrets of where to go, where not to go, and all that stuff. So it's not a one expedition deal, realistically, but I think 100% it can be done.
Alex, I know you're not into the woo, okay? You're very anti-woo. And you know that I am very pro-woo. And, because I think there are some things that are not explainable that are out there. That being said, my friend, one of the theories that I have for a lot of these creatures that are being seen, whether it's Mokele Mbembe or whether it's the Thunderbird, is that we're actually getting visions into a different timeline. Do you think that is possible with this creature?
For Mokele Membe, no, because I haven't seen any proof of anything unusual. But I think it's possible for other creatures. Here's my thing with the stance on the woo, and this is something I think no one really understands. And part of that's my fault because I get pissed off and then I go off. But it's not adding the woo that bugs me to a lot of these animals. It's denying the biological. Well, we know the evidence that points to biological reality. And they're not mutually exclusive, especially when it comes to Bigfoot. So, for example, denying human evolution and denying, all the traits that Bigfoot resembles, hominids or hominid or different primates, ancestors, whatever, is absolutely ridiculous because all the evidence is there. It doesn't mean that you're not adding, you can't add the woo on top of that. So my problem is with the negation of, evolutionary biology, not so much of adding to the woo. But going back to Mokele Membe and animals in the region, because we're talking about a region where there's another animal called the Chipekwe, which looks like a water rhinoceros with one horn. There's a cat with saber teeth, and there's a small bipedal diminutive Bigfoot type, right? But none of those have any paranormal connotation. There's no tales from from any of the population that invoke, well, one day we saw this and it disappeared. Everything is very biological. So for those, no. But I think in terms of, you start talking about pterodactyls, for example, and, in North America, there might be a paranormal aspect to it, and we know from paranormal studies, right? In going back to the ghost world, right? Where someone will walk in a forest and all of a sudden they'll be in a scene from, 200, 300 years ago or medieval times, or they'll see something that's there and then it's gone. It's almost like you're seeing a time warp or you're seeing something that happened once upon a time. So it's absolutely, if that can happen for people and objects, it could absolutely happen for, animals or prehistoric species. Or look at Cannock Chase. There's a place in England called Cannock Chase, and there's a thing called the man monkey, and it's a Bigfoot type in this area, and there's also a plethora of paranormal modalities that occurs around Cannock Chase, including tales of dogman or werewolf, as they used to call it down there. But it's like a phantom type of Bigfoot. They call him the man monkey. Obviously, the area in England isn't big enough to sustain a living biological population, but yet people are seeing these things appear and disappear. But unlike Mokele Membe, for example, you don't have any of the, they'll appear and disappear and so forth. So wrap it up. Okay.
Alex, I'm going to get you to hold on right there because we are going to go to break here at the bottom of the hour. One half of the show gone, one half to go. Let's get into pterodactyls, sea monsters, and whatever else we can throw at Alex Mistretta next. All right, we're clear.
Cool.
Just so you know, ladies, that Alex Mistretta will be walking through the Vegas casinos shirt off when we have our Spaced Out Radio party. Just letting you all know, giving you a warning. He'll be partying with us, minus his shirt.
Yeah, I got to warn you, when we go to Vancouver Island, I do Bigfoot shirtless, too.
That's fine. That's fine. Looks like the borders may open up July 21st through 27th. That's what I'm hearing right now.
Oh, really? Finally?
Yeah. Be about time, man.
Yeah, it's too bad. I was looking forward to that. The Tesla conference that we're all going to have, but
Are you going to that?
yeah, well, I was planning to. Originally, I was going to speak there actually, but
Because myself and Grant Cameron are going to be there too.
yeah, Brian told me, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, originally I was going to do a talk, but well, I mean, we'll see what happens with COVID and when that happens and all that stuff. So, are you talking with Grant Cameron or just separately, Meaner?
No, Ryan wants Grant and I to come out there to speak as kind of like the main guests.
Yeah,
So that's going to be cool.
that's cool. I like Grant a lot.
Yeah, this is the TESSA Experiencers Support Association Conference. It's just outside of Toronto, Ontario. I believe it's the first weekend in October, which will be good. So if anybody wants to join and come join us, that would be really cool. Mm-hmm. When were you thinking of coming up here, Alex?
I don't know. It's
And where?
originally it was in the fall, but the whole COVID thing and not working for so long, kind of.
Like where on Vancouver Island were you thinking of going?
I don't know. I haven't really fully looked into it yet, but I met this guy at a Bigfoot conference a few years ago that lives out there, and he had some interesting areas that he talked about. I was going to try to get back in touch with him and see what he had to say, but yeah, I haven't really laid out the plans yet, because
Dude, you could save a ton of money just by coming up to my place.
yeah,
Just going to the forest.
we can do that.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
I can show you where we found prints, where
Yeah.
we found tree structures. Well, my buddy Mike has. Yeah. Got everything right here. Side by sides to get into areas. Show you.
Yeah, I might have to arrange something. Yeah.
Show you where we got chased out.
Yeah, you're in a good area, man.
Ibarata in Singapore wants to know if you know about the Niami in the Zambezi river monster. Do you know about that one?
I believe, and I'm not 100%. I think that's a local name for Mokele Membe types, right? But from what I understand, there hasn't been any modern sightings for a while. So,
What the hell is this?
and I could be wrong. There's so many local names, in Africa, because apparently beforehand, the animal was seen in a lot more places. So a lot of these countries have different names for it. So I believe that's another name for Mokele Membe, but I don't know that much about what goes on there today. Yeah, sorry.
Mm-hmm. Co-create happy. How are you? Yeah, we'll go meet up with Steve Istall. He's only 2 hours south of me. How many of you guys signed up for UFO Garage? Jeff Steve Garvey, how you doing? I want to see if the numbers, have we hit 2,000 there yet? So we're on in like 25 seconds. Oh, come on. They're like just a few short. Just a few short. I think if we had 8 people sign up for UFO Garage, that would do it. Let's get them to 2,000 tonight. And thank you to Jeremy, to Dirty Filth, Adam, and Ed for the super chats. Here we go with the second half of the show. Second half of Spaced Out Radio is underway tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for hanging on out with us. We really do appreciate your listening ears wherever you are on this planet we call Earth. We want to remind you that if you've missed portions of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. We got Alex Mistretta here tonight. We're talking dinosaurs. Are dinosaurs and dinosaur-like creatures still roaming the earth here on North America, in Europe, Africa? We know Megalodon's out there somewhere. At least I believe. Alex, are you still up on the Megalodon stuff? Do you believe he is out there?
I think it's possible, but I think more likely it's because there have been sightings, obviously, of giant sharks. Of a shark like Megalodon, but it doesn't necessarily have to be Megalodon. I think everybody jumps to the Megalodon thing because everybody knows the name and it's popular. And there's been a movie a few years ago and that whole deal. But realistically, it could be any. It could be another unknown type of shark that's very similar to a great white or a Megalodon. So
I believe that it's out there. And there's one incident that I don't think gets enough press. Is about 10 years ago in Australia, there was a great white shark about 14, 15 feet long that was caught up in the nets. And this was all over the news at the time. You can still go back and actually find the clip to this, where there was a bite mark around this great white's neck that was caught in the net, and it started at the spine on one side and went to the spine on the other. One bite. And obviously it killed this great white shark, but they figured it would take a 30 to 40 foot great white in order to make a mouth that size to wrap around that shark's net to go bite it from spine to the other side of the spine. I believe they are out there, man. And maybe they're not Megalodon per se, but I do believe that there are some 30 to 40 foot great whites out there who are encroaching on that Megalodon size.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. They in the South Pacific they call them Lords of the Deep. These giant white, they're a little bit wider than great whites, according to sightings anyway. And so they've been seeing him for generations. I mean, I've heard stories as long as 100 feet, which I think is an exaggeration. It's really hard to estimate, kind of how long something is in the water, but we're still, something at 40 feet would look like, 80 feet, right? If you're standing there on a boat, it would get that impression to be that much bigger because it's such a huge size. I mean, you look at a great white today, right? Maximum size, 20 feet or so. But if you were to guess, if you look at a 20-foot great white while you're in the water on a boat, you would probably guess 30 to 40, so I think there's some exaggeration there. But, that's a big bite mark, I remember that incident very well. So, yeah, I think something's out there.
Why do you think we're not seeing more of them?
They're probably, Megalodon, or, if it's another shark similar to Megalodon, they're deep water sharks, and again, we know 5% of the ocean, if you really think about it, right? Officially, it's about 5%. And all the ships have the same shipping lanes, right? People stay close to shore, to the coast. So it could be they're just out there. We're just not seeing them. I mean, what's the deepest ocean? What, 12,000 feet? Over 2 miles deep. There's a lot of room for things to hide. I think, if they're deep water sharks for the most part, they don't come up to shore all that often. That's probably would count for us not seeing them, which is a good sign, which is a good sign for us because, we have less of a chance of dying. I know you have a fear of getting bit in half, so.
Yes. Or like that scuba diver recently in Cape Cod who got swallowed up accidentally by a humpback and luckily got spit out. That's my luck. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you ever hear that story about Jacques Cousteau in Djibouti?
No, fill me in.
So there's a French cryptozoologist. He wrote a book, and he was on TV in France. Philippe Coudray, I believe his name was. Apparently, he heard this story, and this is sort of secondhand, so it's hard to say how true it is. And Cousteau was, not always the most honest of individual, for those that don't know. But the story was that, Jacques Cousteau went to Djibouti in the Gulf of Tadjoura, Gubei, in this bit called the Island of the Devil. And they've had stories down there of a gigantic animal that, kind of lived in the region. So the story goes like Cousteau got a camel and put him in the cage and dumped it in the water and see if he could attract, whatever this predator was. And they were filming at the same time. And when they pulled the cage back up, and the cage was completely mangled and the animal was gone, and, obviously something had taken it. And according to Coudray, Cousteau had a film and decided not to show it to anybody. And Cousteau, said that I don't think the world is ready for what's down there, and never talked about it again. So it's an interesting story. I have no idea if it's true or not. But I always found it was kind of really cool, kind of, intriguing story. But it is backed up by, there's been a lot of legends of something living in those waters. So I don't know.
Where were those waters again?
In Djibouti. It's called the Gulf of Tadjoura. And the place, it's called Island of the Devil. It's Gublet al-Karab, or Karab. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce correctly. So Tadjoura is Tadgoura.
And what is this creature supposed to be?
They never give a description, but a lot of Coudray hypothesized that it was a megalodon, and that's what some of the rumors were, or a giant shark. But again, there's no real proof. It's just a story that's gone around in the underwater community, so to speak.
Right.
In Europe, no one really heard of it out here in the United States. I happen to speak French, so I read Coudray's book and all that, and that's where I found it. But
sticking with sea monsters, Nicola is asking, what do you think Champ is? This is from the sea monster at Lake Champlain.
Yeah, well, I think Champ is first of all, it's one of the ones that has some of the better evidence for it, Obviously, at that point, you sort of have to assume that I don't like looking at lake monsters as just individual animals in just one lake. I like looking at it as a worldwide species. So, you'd have to think if something's able to survive in Champ, it would be similar to something that's in, at Loch Ness, for example, where we're dealing with one type of animal. And I don't know. I know there's a theory that it's an amphibian, and I think that's kind of an astute original idea. But I've always leaned towards mammal personally, which doesn't explain how it can stay hidden so much. But the physiology and the way it swims and the descriptions that, it drops in the water and goes up and down, whatever, to me says mammalian, But to be honest, I don't have a real good handle on what Champ is. It's always kind of, for whatever reason, it's just not enough information, for me.
All right, let's move on here, and we'll get more into sea monsters here a little bit. Solar Warden has a question for you. Alex, are you familiar with Brooks Agnew? He speaks about a massive ocean under the Atlantic whereby there seems to be an entire set of life living in darkness, hidden between two worlds.
I'm not familiar with the name, no. I do know that it discovered creatures recently at, 8,000 to 10,000 feet that are brand new to science. Some of them are literally invisible because they don't, they have a way to not reflect light, whatever. But I know that, but yeah, I'm not familiar with Brooks Agnew at all, though.
All right, well, let's get into other dinosaurs here. One of the ones that bugs me, if we can call it a dinosaur, I don't think we can, is the legend of the Thunderbird.
Yeah.
Okay, this one bugs me a little bit because with the alleged 40-foot wingspan, this would appear on radar. It's the size of an airplane. It would appear on radar. I could just imagine the size of its droppings. Yet we don't see any big trees or cars painted white, just from something flying over. This is one of the creatures, like I stated earlier, where I believe people are having the sightings, but maybe they are getting a look back in time or in a different dimension or timeline and seeing this. Yet, every year there's reports of people claiming to see a giant thunderbird in the sky. And it doesn't matter whether you're on the East Coast of the United States, you're on the West Coast, right up to Canada here. It just seems to appear.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's problematic. And again, it's not one of those I spent a lot of time on. But there does seem to be a pattern of events, right, where there's a lot of sightings in Pennsylvania. There seems to be a pattern maybe of migration, where then there's a lot of sightings in the Midwest and towards Alaska, right, if you start grouping historical sightings. There's always that story, right, in the 70s in Illinois, the little kid that got picked up by, allegedly by a thunderbird. So I don't know. I agree with you. I think the size maybe is exaggerated. Like how big? I'm not even sure how big it'd have to be to show up on radar, though. Right?
Well, there have been alleged rumors that on the East Coast that these have appeared on radar and then disappeared.
Yeah, I mean, if they float low enough, right, then this will have to be picked up. But then, yeah, you would assume it'd be seen more often. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I agree with you. It'd have to be such a small population, I think, for them to stay hidden from that standpoint. But, again, if they fly in regions where there's not a big population, I mean, I don't know how often do people get crapped on by an eagle or condor or right, addressing your poop.
Well, I realize that, but an eagle, you're looking at a wingspan for a larger one, say around 8 feet.
Right.
Okay. Now, if you're looking at a wingspan of 40 feet, you're getting into jet fighter territory there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, like if I pull up, what's the wingspan of an F-18 Hornet? The wingspan is 37 feet 5 inches.
Yeah.
56 feet in length. So, realistically, an F-18 Hornet is the size of these alleged Thunderbirds.
Yeah, 40 feet seems like an exaggeration to me. I know that there's a hypothesis that they're living, territorans, right, which was these giant birds that used to live from Argentina to all the way to North America. But I think 20. If we're gonna realistically, I think for a hidden population of birds to exist, I'd go as far as 20 feet, and I think that'd be large enough to be special, but still small enough to be able to stay hidden. If you reduce it to 20 feet, and if they migrate at night, if they live in areas a little far enough away where most people live, I think they could stay hidden. But I agree with you. Thunderbirds are not the most likely to be real biological species, in terms of all cryptozoology. But I don't have an answer for you because I don't know.
Well, even if you divided it by 2,
yeah,
a 20-foot wingspan, you're still in the size of a Cessna.
Yeah.
Right? That can be picked up on radar.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why it's not big. I honestly never really thought about the radar thing because I never really looked into it. But it's a problem. I don't know, but maybe they are picked up on radar. Maybe there's such few of them that they are picked up on radar occasionally. People just ignore it. Most radar operators are not real forthcoming when they pick up weird stuff on radar. As I've learned with the UFO thing. So.
Right. Okay. Well, let's switch over to pterodactyls then, or pterosaurs.
Okay.
Jonathan Whitcomb has done some amazing work with trying to track down these sightings. A lot of them are around First Nations areas and reserves. They tend to go from Mexico into Texas and along the coast of California straight up to northern British Columbia. I don't think they're seen in Alaska. But this is something that they call the ropin as well, where at night apparently it's seen with its chest glowing with a red light, almost like the heart can glow through its translucent skin.
Green light.
Or green, yeah. And, what do you know about this?
Well, the ropin is usually that's from Papua New Guinea. That's where they call the ropin. Actually, I like the glowing aspect of it. To me, that is actually an indication of being a real animal, because here's my hypothesis on that, right? There's owls, for example, in Europe, and there's in Germany, I forget the type of owl, that likes to sleep in tree trunks. What happens in tree trunks is there's this fluorescent fungus that the owl rubs himself in, and when he flies at night, he actually glows. So you can look it up. There's pictures of, it's really rare. There's pictures of these owls at night flying, and they glow. So I think to me that says that we could be having a real animal in Papua New Guinea that during the day spends its time in tree trunks when there's that fungi, and it sleeps in there, rubs himself, whatever, and that's why it's seen glowing at night. Or it could be, again, a dye thing, right? It's eating, like, we know there's turtles in the areas that exhibit, a green glow, right? They were discovered, I think, a few years ago. So to me, that speaks to a real animal. And they're not particularly huge either, So the ropin is, there's nothing that's impossible about the ropin. Now we start talking about the bigger pterodactyls in North America, that becomes a little more problematic, because you would assume they'd be seen more often if they had a breeding population, right? And now, on the other hand, you start talking about the Mexican-Texas border, and I received a sighting from there myself, just one, many years ago. This guy called me up to tell me he saw pterodactyl on the ground, and he was looking at it. But there's a huge mountain range, on the other side of Mexico that, again, it's almost unexplored. It's wild. It's huge. Very few people ever go down there. So if there would be a breeding population of pterodactyls or something similar to a pterodactyl, again, it doesn't have to be a prehistoric animal. It could be a modern species that, through convergent evolution, developed traits very, very similar to, an ancient pterodactyl, right? Because that niche, once an animal disappears from nature, that niche is open, and nature, as they say, abhors a vacuum, and it wants to be filled. That's where convergent evolution comes in. So when it comes to Texas and Mexico, I could see them being a real breeding population. But you're right, we've had sightings in really odd places in major cities and more populated areas, and those are really hard to explain. And that's where, your idea that perhaps there's time warp, or people are seeing something from the past. I can't completely go against that, but in some of those areas. But I think, as I was saying, I think the ropin in Papua New Guinea and some of the pterodactyl or pterodactyl-like sightings in Texas, Mexico could be a biological species.
Up north in British Columbia, this pterodactyl is said to feed off of humans.
Yeah.
And it is believed that in a couple of the reservations up north, that First Nations people who go missing, namely men, have been seen picked up by the claws of this creature and flown way up into the nests high up in the mountains.
Yeah.
Is that just story, legend, or is it actually happening?
I have no idea. I don't know. It's the thing with we're this weird dichotomy when we start talking about indigenous stories, right? Because on one hand, they know their local creatures a lot better than we do, But also, you look like, for example, and this is also sort of my problem with some of the indigenous stories about Bigfoot that borders on the paranormal, is that they also have paranormal stories about the wolf, But yet we know that the wolf is a real biological animal, right? Yet it features in a lot of these semi-mythological stories. So with the pterodactyl in British Columbia, I don't know. I haven't personally looked into it. And I've heard other people allude to the story you just told me. I don't know enough about him. But I know there's similar stories in other parts of the world There's the orang bati in Saram, for example, where it's described as more reddish kind of fur, and it also goes and picks up people and and eats people or whatever. So it's not, those stories aren't just from British Columbia Native American. So I don't know,
What do you think this creature is feeding off of? Animals, deer, fish?
In Papua New Guinea, because it's seen so often, for example, flying over like the water, probably fish, maybe sea turtles, whatever. So if it's a pterodactyl or it's a modern species resembling a pterodactyl, it's a reptile, right? So you sort of have to look into what reptiles tend to eat. So they're, it could be meat. So if it's a small one, right, reptiles can snakes and eat a mouse, but something much bigger can certainly can feed on you, Dave.
A lot of meat there.
I mean,
A lot of meat there. Alex, we got 3.5 minutes before we got to go to break. At the top of the hour, our guest tonight, Alex Mistretta, we're talking pterodactyls. Now, the pterodactyls that are seen in Texas and even up here to BC are like right out of the book. They got the bony head that protrudes from the back of the skull with the long beak. We see...
In New Guinea, too.
Pardon me?
In New Guinea as well, you get that description with the...
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so if they are being seen, how do we know people aren't misinterpreting this for, say, a vulture or a condor?
I'm sure it happens from time to time, but once you start talking about animal, because the descriptions, like the guy that saw it told me he was only a few feet away and he saw it on the ground, and the description that comes over and over again is the having no feathers, right? It's like hairless type of animal. So we're either dealing with with a gigantic bat, which doesn't quite explain the facial features of a pterodactyl-like, or we're dealing with either a new type of flying reptile or a prehistoric type of reptile, or people, and I mean, I don't know how much misidentification could account for all the sightings. I don't know. I don't know what the math is right there. It's not like we're seeing, it's not like we're seeing pterodactyls every week, like people like Bigfoot, So it does leave room for the possibility that it doesn't actually exist.
What about? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, finish.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, but there's enough there. There's enough meat there that it's interesting. I tried to have a New Guinea expedition a few years ago. We were almost on board, and then kind of same story. People backed out, and never ended up going.
Right, with 90 seconds to go, Race Fan is asking, what's your opinion on these people who are having mini T-Rex sightings?
Okay, so there's 3 different areas we're talking about if we're talking about an animal like a T-Rex, right? So there's sightings in Australia. It's called the Burunjor, or Burunjor. Again, my pronunciation is terrible. I never know how to pronounce some of these things. But who's supposedly very T-Rex-like. And again, being T-Rex-like doesn't mean it's a T-Rex, obviously. Having T-Rex survive to this day, it's a little bit of a stretch, but the possibility that we're talking about a reptile in Australia that, that's partly bipedal. We know ancient reptiles could have been bipedal. We know they discovered a crocodile that used to walk on 2 feet, So that possibility of a modern adaptation or vestigial adaptation showing up in a modern population, even of an unknown species, is a possibility. Or, Australia's a weird place, though, man. There's a lot of weird shit that goes on in the middle when there's nobody at. I had a guide years ago, and I couldn't get the money together that was going to take me out there and show me a lot of the weird stuff that was going on down there. Wouldn't exactly tell me everything, but the T-Rex thing was one of them. People were actually seeing him. So I don't know what to make of it because I haven't been down there. Now, what's more interesting is the other 2 areas. So we have the Four Corners area.
I'm going to get you to hold on because we're going to finish this conversation when we come back.
Okay.
Miniature Tyrannosaurus Rexes, miniature raptors running around the deserts of the southwestern United States. Is it happening? We'll find out. Alex Mistretta is our guest tonight. We got him for another 30 minutes here on Spaced Out Radio. We'll be back. All right, buddy. I'm going to just run my dogs out. I'll be right back, okay?
All right.
All right, buddy. I'm back. Let's get you up here. All right. We got about a minute and a half here.
Okay.
Hey, Jazz, how you doing? Nice to see you. When we get to the final break, just hang on during the break, and then I'll say a proper goodbye to you when we come back. Ufologist, how you doing, man? Thank you for joining us. Dave's left eye is so lazy it collects unemployment. Thanks, Vin. Appreciate that. Big thank you to Magnus, to Jeremy, to Dirty Filth, Adam, and Ed for the super chats. It's a great way to support what we do on this show on a nightly basis. And here we go, everyone.
Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Here we go with the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears. We want to say hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on TalkStream Live, Revolution Radio, and KPNL. All of our archives are free by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Kelter. Kelter is your password. Use it wisely, space travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. For the final time tonight, we introduce Alex Mistretta, the paranormal man of mystery, is talking dinosaurs. And right before the break, you wanted to give 3 points to a lot of these miniature dinosaurs that people are claiming to see, like miniature Tyrannosaurus rexes. Alex, welcome back.
Yeah, so I would say more accurate description would be more like looking like a mini raptor type of thing. So I already kind of covered the one in Australia, which is a little bit different. It's a little bit of a bigger animal, allegedly. So, but there's two other areas that have always been kind of interesting to me. It's the Four Corners area, right here in North America, and they're called the river dinos, where these kind of a small raptor bipedal-like creature that have allegedly been seen, especially in Colorado, and we'll get back to that. And the second place is in the Atacama Desert in Chile. And they're called the Eureka monster down there. And people have mentioned that they look a little bit like Dromaeosaurus dinosaurs, which are theropods, meaning that in all likelihood they have commonalities with modern birds like ostriches and other non-flight birds, right? Because again, in all likelihood, theropods and modern birds share common ancestors, and birds are actually modern dinosaurs. So, which brings me back to these two type of animals have been described as raptors. A lot of the people have mentioned raptors, especially after Jurassic Park became so popular, right? And but if you look at the description, they could just as well be featherless birds, for example, right? For if it became advantageous in a desert environment, such as the Colorado near the Four Corners area, or in Chile in Atacama Desert, to lose your feathers for whatever reason, I could see those being just birds and not actual, dinosaurs. If we're gonna have to go with something that's more likely than the other, that would kind of be my hypothesis to go with. But I don't know. We're not talking the most remote. I mean, well, Chile's pretty remote, but the Four Corners area, we're not talking exactly. This isn't like the Congo in the middle of the jungle. So you have to start wondering, how can an animal like this stay hidden?
Well, that's the big thing.
Right.
We don't know, but yet people continue to see these mini raptors running around. They tend to see the like you said, in the Four Corners there, which what is that? Texas, Oklahoma,
it's New Mexico, Colorado.
Yeah, those four. What do these little raptor beings look like?
Yeah, they just look exactly. Just look at Jurassic Park, and they literally look like those. They really look like mini raptors. But there's not that many. It's not like we have a plethora of descriptions to go with. There's only a handful of sightings occasionally. The one in Chile is a little more interesting because there's a lot more up close sightings, and they're a little more numerous that I'm aware of. And that one does seem a little more bird-like than the one in the Four Corner area. So that's why I kind of have to go with a undiscovered species of flightless birds, perhaps one that lost its feathers for whatever reason. But yeah, and it's hard because culture and pop culture is so influential in cryptozoology. If you think about it, right, a lot of these raptor descriptions came about after Jurassic Park was so popular because I'm not saying these animals didn't exist prior to that, but I think our descriptions and the traits that we notice and then report to people are very much based on things that are in our head and things that we have seen culturally. So those traits tend to be emphasized. So how much do they really look like like raptors in the movies? I don't know. It's the descriptions and it isn't necessarily what the animal really is or looks like. So I couldn't tell you if it's a bird or a dinosaur for real.
For sure. I mean, how often are these seen?
I'm not entirely sure. River dinos, not that often. I mean, I don't even know of any modern sightings. I know the Eureka monster in Chile is seen a little more often. So I know there's been some recent sightings that I remember reading about, but river dinos, I haven't heard anything in quite a few years, to be honest. But again, even that area, if you go to Colorado, where it seems to have more sightings that occurred in Colorado, you're still talking about areas that very few people venture out into, and not all that often. There's enough areas for small populations to hang out in that they wouldn't really necessarily encounter that many people. And again, and the other thing we have to take into account is, let's say somebody sees something that looks like a raptor. What's the percentage of those sightings that are going to become public? So, I'm 1%, 20%, 50%. There's no way to really determine what that number is. So it's really hard to say how many sightings have been and how often without knowing what percentage of sightings that we're not, are not going public or we're not hearing about. And that's always a problem with, I think, all things cryptozoology.
Okay, well, let's go back to sea monsters for a second here, because when we look at sea monsters, whether like at the beginning of the show where we talked about Ogopogo, we talked a little bit about Champ or the Loch Ness Monster, is there a greater chance that these dinosaur-like creatures are still swimming in the waters of lakes and inlets around the world?
I think it depends on the problem you have now. Is just like what? It's got to be over 100 lakes that have reported monsters in them, right? They can't all be true. And I mean, there's even one right here in California, Lake Elsinore, which, I heard there's sightings of a Loch Ness type. So I went down there and there's absolutely no way in hell anything's living in that, in that lake. It's shallow and it's not that big. But so there's a lot of these things don't actually exist. And again, when we start dealing with water monsters, you have to pay very close attention to kind of descriptions you're getting. Because at Loch Ness, everyone thinks of the long neck and the small head, kind of like a plesiosaur, type animal. Part of that was based on some of the earlier pictures, which one of them turned out to be hoax. But the majority of sightings aren't really that. Majority of sightings is just a big animal mass that kind of pops up and then sinks, pops up and sinks. It's not really the long neck and small head isn't really described that often. unless you take into account the 1933 sightings on the road where these things, where someone claimed to have seen one on the road or on the side of the lake, which is something that's actually more common than people think. There's one of my favorite is the Patagonian plesiosaur, as it's called. So Patagonia is in Argentina, and there's been sightings along the river systems deep in a jungle there of Loch Ness type animals, or the traditional Loch Ness motif. So the body, the long neck and the small head. And there's a biologist that told this story that had these sightings many, many years ago. But he saw them resting on a rock, and he says they're pretty small, and they seem to be behaving like seals. And that's when it kind of gave me the idea that we might be talking about the ones that are more plesiosaur-like are actually mammals. So we could be talking about long-necked pinnipeds, long-necked seals. You're looking at something like Ogopogo, for example. It's very similar to Caddy, which is interesting. It's a very similar area, right? You could have used a river system to get in and out at some point, be stuck in a lake. Could look very much like a Zoolodon, right? I know that's a prevalent theory of a primitive whale that were very much elongated. You mentioned a sturgeon. I really think that a lot of these lakes are actually sturgeon that people are seeing, or catfish even. People underestimate how big and strange these animals are in real life. So I think to answer your question, there's a lot of different animals that can make up the lake monster modality,
What would be the chances of it actually being a true sea serpent? And I'm going to throw this out there because I know there hasn't been one found, but what about a freshwater oarfish?
I think oarfish behave they're very stiff. They're not particularly dynamic. And they're pretty skinny. I'd be surprised if we're dealing with oarfish. I think it'd be more likely that it would be a giant eel in some instances, more than an oarfish. If you're going to go in that direction, I think that's possible. Even we know Loch Ness has eels, So I remember there's a footage from 2-3 years ago of this kind of, they talk about. We have a little Loch Ness monster in film, and it looked to me like it was an eel. And there's always the possibility that what we have is a composite of different animals people are seeing, and then you put all the sightings together, the eel, so you have the elongated, you have the sturgeon, you have the size, and people kind of put them all together as one animal, and that turns out to be, what becomes a mythical Loch Ness monster, for example. So I think there's a lot of possibilities with lake monsters. What's interesting, though, is the sea monsters, aside from Cadbrosaurus, near British Columbia, which is sighted all the way up to Alaska. And in the 1950s, in fact, there are actually sightings all the way up to Southern California, which don't exist anymore. And that one still seems to be pretty prevalent, But historically, a lot of sea monsters that were seen around Scandinavia, which today is a really rich area of lake monster reports, but you rarely hear of reports in the ocean anymore. Around England, for example, there used to be a lot of sightings right back in the 1800s, right? You don't really hear stories anymore. Scandinavia, probably a lot of these animals, if they existed, are probably extinct. So what you could have in lakes like Loch Ness or Moher in Scotland, or the Scandinavian lakes, which to me is some of the better evidence, might be the last remnants of these sea animals that got trapped in lakes ultimately. And, because then they evolved in a finite environment. So through insular dwarfism, they shrunk a little bit. So, the great sea serpents of old just shrunk and now able to survive, in some of these very deep lakes. So I think that's a possibility.
Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. But, what would they be feeding off of? Would they be feeding off of fish? Would they be feeding off of microorganisms, seaweed, kelp type of food?
I think most likely fish, right? You have to assume with animals that big, it needs a certain amount of food, a certain amount of supplements. So I don't know if vegetation would be enough. And that's where it gets interesting, because that's where you start looking at the fish population in these lakes. There's enough food of a food source to sustain a living population of something that large, So, and that's weird because I've looked up some reports on that, and some scientists talking about it, and you get like both ends of the spectrum. Some say no, some say there's plenty of food. So it's really hard to say. And again, it all depends on, without knowing what kind of animal you're dealing with, it's really hard to be able to tell how much food source does it need, and what it eats. But my guess would be, fish. Some of these lakes are huge, they're like little seas, so there's probably plenty of room and plenty of food, presumably.
Very true. Let's get to a question from Spanish Fly here. With the catastrophic climate changed already affecting migration patterns of many species, do you think this will push creatures into more human-populated areas?
That doesn't seem to be the trend. I think you get individual creatures that you've noticed that tend to venture closer. Like that story about a leopard that came into town and became friends with a cow. I don't know if you guys saw that on TV, but the leopard started coming closer to civilization, and they found out that Natty was visiting this one cow. But so I think individuals maybe, but I haven't noticed a trend where an entire species are becoming closer to humanity. I think there's still enough room out there. I think if species shrink, I don't think we're not going to see them more. They're not going to come closer. But also, and I just lost my train of thought. I forgot what I was going to say. I'm sure it was very profound, though. But yeah, I'm sorry. I totally forgot what I was about to get to. My apologies.
That's quite okay. So,
yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Dave. But also, there's been a trend where more and more people living in cities too, right? There's less and less people actually living in the countryside or in the jungle or in the woods. If you look at the trend, mostly people come into cities looking for jobs. So I think there's less and less people actually close to nature. So I think, and from that standpoint, sightings would be declining as well because I don't think we're out there quite as much.
All right, we got 7 minutes left with you tonight, and it would be remiss of us if we didn't have a quick talk about Sasquatch and Dogman. Let's start off with Dogman, because this is a creature that seems to be, the house cat of the wild forest, where it's just pissed off about everything. In my opinion, and I could be wrong on this, but over the last year or so, it seems to me the Dogman sightings are really going down comparatively to Bigfoot sightings. Have you noticed that trend too?
I don't know if they've gone down. I think there's been an increase in Bigfoot sightings, but I tend to think it's because of the popularity of the TV shows. More people are coming out with their stories of Bigfoot because it's more socially acceptable now, I think, at a certain level, right? And there's more interest in the phenomenon. So I think that is kind of skewed because I don't see... So 10, 15 years ago, you barely heard of Dogman, right? Then the whole thing completely exploded and you had all these sightings all over the place. So I think it kind of reached its peak of interest, and maybe I think people are reporting it less. And the average person, let's say the average person has seen a Bigfoot and sees a Dogman, right, on the weekend, they're more likely going to talk about Bigfoot than Dogman because it seems so crazy, even compared to Bigfoot. So I think that data might be skewed somewhat.
Okay, so for people who may not know in Radioland what a Dogman is, let's explain what it is.
So, all right, so everybody knows kind of what Bigfoot is, right? So Dogman is, in some ways, it's a canine version of Bigfoot, so biologically speaking, Dogman is impossible because of the bone structure of, wolves, dogs, the canid family. It would be absolutely impossible for an animal like that to be bipedal. And that's where Dogman really differentiates from Bigfoot, where Bigfoot could be, all traits and aspects of Bigfoot, regardless of whether there's paranormal attributes added on, can be explained with this relation to biology. With the Dogman, you really can't. So you're looking at a werewolf, is what people are describing out in the woods. Or at least that's what they're comparing it to.
Okay. And it seems to have a little bit more of a vicious connotation to it, rather than the docile attitude that most Sasquatch seem to have.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I've had even though that said, though, I've had a few personal stories. People have told me of Sasquatch getting very aggressive and actually killing people. But yeah, it seems the Dogman is definitely more territorial and aggressive from that standpoint. So, which I would indicate as something very different from Sasquatch. Now that said, I had somebody, an ex. I may have mentioned this on the show before. An ex NSA person that approached me some years ago and about doing some work, and anyway, and I'm going nowhere, but because a couple people ruined it, and that person had mentioned the possibility, and I couldn't quite tell if it was a question they're asking me or there was something that they knew. That they mentioned, what do you think of the idea that Dogman is actually related to Bigfoot, but it's been genetically manipulated by the U.S. government, by an outside party, So from that standpoint, it wouldn't really be a dog. It was just, I think some of the ears and the muzzle reminds people of a dog, but it could be something quite different, could be related to Bigfoot. That's just something that was brought up to me. I don't know, so I just thought it was interesting to get out there, though.
Right.
Because with CRISPR technology today, that is absolutely 100% possible. We can mix and match, traits from different animals. We can, in fact, we could create our own Bigfoot if we really wanted to, and if we mix, chimp, gorilla genes of human genes. The technology is there to do it. Obviously, people aren't doing it because for, a variety of, of obvious reasons, but the technology is absolutely there to create these chimeras, and that creates a whole other aspect to some of these stories like Dogman,
No, I get you, and I can see that. But for the difference between Bigfoot and Dogman, are we seeing any territorial battles between these creatures?
I don't know. There's not enough sightings for me to be able to determine if they're living in the same area. You would think that if there were, there certainly would be conflict, because you're talking about two, big alpha type animals, territorial with, both presumably omnivores, so they would be fighting for resources. But again, there's certain geographical areas of Dogman sightings as well, right? There's more sightings in Kentucky, Upper Michigan, for example, So, but there's also a lot of Bigfoot sightings in Upper Michigan, so I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't think there's enough data on that,
I would love to see that brawl, man. I'm dead serious. That is one brawl that I totally want to see.
Yeah, could you imagine if you came back with that film?
Oh, that is literally, one of the great highlights that I would say could happen here, man. I would love to see it. Love to see it. And I don't know if it's possible, but I'll tell you, I would be very, very interested in seeing that. I want pay-per-view for that one, Alex.
You can charge a lot of money for that one.
Oh yeah. We have about 90 seconds to go here. Your final thoughts on hunting cryptids?
I don't know if I have one major over, but I think all cryptids are, very different and take different approaches. But I think like I was saying earlier, I think the most important thing is that we got to look at it from an ecological standpoint, in terms of how finding these animals can help us with biodiversity loss, or how they can help us, or that can help the people that live in those areas, and how maybe they can revive, our sense of wonder and revive our spirit of exploration that, we seem to have lost, especially here in the United States. So I think it's not just a vanity project. These aren't monsters. These represent much bigger ideals. And I think they can literally make the world a better place, I think, if we, treat cryptozoology seriously and with respect.
Well, I don't know if there's much of that in the paranormal world, but we'll end it with this. Kim Jellin says, groovy eyewear, Alex.
I wrote especially for Dave.
I appreciate that. Alex, we're going to do this again very, very soon. Good luck in all your searches. Don't go get eaten by any great whites while you're surfing on the California coastline, because we kind of like you around here.
I'm going to take you in the water one day.
Nope. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. Alex Mistretta, everybody. Real live dinosaurs and cryptids. He's a good friend of this show. We'll definitely bring him back soon. Coming up next, we have the SOR Newswire and the Thought of the Day. Stay tuned. Spaced Out Radio continues after this. Great show, buddy. Good to have you back.
Yeah, thanks, man. It was fun.
Yeah. And we appreciate you, man. We appreciate you a lot around here, and it's good to have you back with us.
Well, I mean, you're one of the few that kind of honestly kind of lets me say what I want to say and kind of caters to my strength. I don't have to talk about things I don't know anything about,
Oh,
so
very true. Very
that's
true.
nice. That's nice. I never understood, when people have you on and they want to talk about anything else but what you do.
Yeah, what do you do? What do you do again?
Yeah, right?
Who are you? I gave one friend of mine crap because his first question on every podcast that he did was, who are you? Tell me about you.
Yeah.
And I said to him, why are you doing that? He goes, well, I'm trying to catch the guest off guard. I said, whoa. I said, no. I said, don't be an asshole. Don't be an asshole. That person has volunteered their time for you. Treat them with respect.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I guess you're right. I said, I know I'm right. I've done over 1,500 shows. Fuck. Just listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. I may not know much, but the radio game I know. Alan Hold, how are you? Good to see you. Well, Alex, I'm going to go get ready for the news here.
Okay.
And
I'm going to go to sleep.
We really appreciate you, buddy.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I appreciate it.
Take care, bro.
All right. See you. Bye, buddy.
Alex Mistretta, everyone. Hi, Eva. Thank you, Spanish Fly. Appreciate that, man. Where'd you get your biology degree? Oh, that's just not nice, Fap. That's just not nice. Dave went surfing and a great white couldn't fit his jaws around him to get a bite. That's not nice. I mean, literally, you were like a lollipop for a great white. Can't even get your head in its mouth. Mr. Cowley, welcome back to the show. Oh, Mr. Cowley loves his spaced out radio. Not another Heather. So what are implying about twins? Who has twins? Wow. You're an Aggie. Spanish Fly is an Aggie. Does anybody really know what an Aggie is? Now I gotta look that up. What is an Aggie? Derived from agricultural and mechanical commonly associated with universities. Oh, there were 20,229 Texas Aggies who served in World War II. Very cool. Very cool. Mystic Walk, how you doing? Gotcha, Spanish Fly. Thank you. Oh, Fap, we love you just the way you are. And thank you for that super chat, man. Appreciate you. Are you having a good day, buddy? Stay a little bit better, or are you still struggling today? What the hell does this mean? If Dave goes swimming in a lake at night and gets eaten by a crocodile, is that breakfast for dinner? Thank goodness we are 10 seconds away. Thank you, Fap, Ozzy, Steve, Magnus, Jeremy, Dirty Filth, Adam, and Ed for the amazing super chats. Really do appreciate that. Here we go. We rounded third. We're heading for home tonight on Spaced Out Radio. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for joining us. Really do appreciate earning your listening ears. Want to remind you that if you've missed most of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. That's the button I'm looking for. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram, Spaced Out Radio Show. Speaking of the news, the news is always changing, where we get to the SOR Newswire at the back end of every show, where we get to the weird, the strange, the wacky, and sometimes the oddball. You know, last week the New York Post came out and said, we don't believe in aliens, it's all a bunch of crap, it's a bunch of lunacy, we don't believe Lou Elizondo, we don't believe anything, and yet today they come out with a new UFO story. The majority of Americans believe in aliens, and we really do think they come in peace. According to a Pew Research study, about 65% of people say they think there is intelligent alien life on other planets, and even stronger majority of about 87% say they don't believe UFOs are a security threat at all, only represent a minor one. Americans under 30 years old and men are just two groups most inclined to believe in extraterrestrial life. In June 2021, the Pentagon released a highly anticipated report stating that 144 UFO sightings had been reported by government sources since 2004. Only one of those sightings was identified with high confidence. The country's fascination and the government's investigation into aliens is nothing new. Project Blue Book was an official government program established in 1948 to investigate the reports of UFOs. The reports were archived and eventually made available to the public under the Freedom of Information Act. They claim that the program investigated 12,618 reported UFO sightings, establishing that 701 of them remain unidentified. Even in 1997, from a CNN Time poll, found that 80% of Americans thought that the government was hiding knowledge of the existence of extraterrestrial life forms. The report was released 50 years after the Roswell incident, which made Area 51 popular. Though Area 51 was established in 1955, the mystery began sometime in the 80s when a man claiming to have been employed there said he saw scientists engineer an alien aircraft, which some believe was modeled after a UFO that had crashed in Roswell in 1947. The man's story was later proven false, as it was discovered that an alleged alien saucer turned out to be an advanced weather balloon, but that's not dissuaded Americans from believing in otherworldly neighbors. You think they could remember the name Bob Lazar, and Bob Lazar's story hasn't been disproven. In 2019, Facebook event called Storm Area 51, They Can't Stop All of Us, had nearly 365,000 confirmed attendees and some 384,000 interested in the mission to see them aliens. The Facebook event has since been taken down. And while the Roswell UFO Fest has moved to online due to COVID, despite much resistance, the annual otherworldly event resumed just last week in honor of the extraterrestrial holy ground. The site of a supposed UFO crash in 1947 draws thousands each year. Americans are believing. They are. All right, let's get to some fun facts here. NASA's Ingenuity helicopter soars 2,000 feet through Martian atmosphere in its 9th successful test flight. The aerial trooper set new records for speed and distance, as well as stretched the capabilities of its navigation system. Yes, Ingenuity is the little robot that could, and the little engine that could. Isn't that right? And on July 5th, Ingenuity flew for 166.4 seconds, long enough to traverse a total distance of 2,050 feet. Ingenuity even broke its speed record by clocking in at 15 feet per second, the equivalent of a brisk run, according to Eric Berger for Ars Technica. The flight was a landmark for Ingenuity. Previously, the gravity-defying Gizmo had stayed course to its mothership, NASA's Perseverance rover, flying a short distance ahead, then waiting for the heftier land-bound companion to catch up. In its 9th flight, Ingenuity leveled up from a companion role to a solar mission, and it flew over the sandy Cettea terrain where no rover has gone nor can go before. Cettea translates to amidst in the sand in the Navajo language of Diné Bizaad, and the terrain is exactly as its name describes. The undulating sands and high slopes covering this stretch of land would hamper any wheeled vehicle daring to cross, but not a flying one. So on July 5th, Ingenuity took a shortcut straight across the Cettea towards a safer plain in the south. Along the way, it snapped close-up images of Cettea's terrain for further scientific study. Ingenuity's latest flight demonstrates the benefits of having an aerial vehicle around. It can work with Perseverance to divide and conquer different types of Martian terrains to cover more ground. A successful flight would be a powerful demonstration of the capability that an aerial vehicle, and only an aerial vehicle, can bring to bear in the context of Mars exploration, traveling quickly across otherwise untraversable terrain while scouting for interesting scientific targets. Namely, what about them aliens? What about them aliens? Oh well. Here's a weird one. 6-year-old Jane Blasio was playing in her backyard one afternoon when her life was upended. Her father, Jim, asked her to come indoors because he wanted to tell her something. The Akron, Ohio resident ran inside to find Jim puffing on a cigarette. "We have something to tell you, and it may be hard for you to understand," he said to Blasio and her sister Michelle, who was 11 and sitting at the kitchen table. As he fumbled for words, Joan, the girl's mother, announced, "You two were adopted. Do you know what that means?" In that instant, Blasio had little interest in understanding what being adopted actually meant, but the incident in 1971 planted a seed that eventually consumed her life. "It's like that moment was burned into me," the 56-year-old federal law enforcement officer says. Blasio's decades-long search to find her birth parents ended up exposing how a small-town Georgia abortion doctor named Thomas Hicks ran an illicit baby-selling operation that flourished during the 1950s and 60s. During her quest for answers, Blasio not only learned that she was one of 200 children sold in the back alley behind the clinic, but she soon went to work helping dozens of now grown infants, known as Hicks babies, track down their birth parents and other relatives. "My father knew that the Hicks actions were illegal, but my mother just wanted a baby and didn't want to know anything, so my dad was going to do whatever he would to make her happy," says Blasio, who writes about her search to uncover her past in her new memoir, Taken at Birth. Blasio spent much of her teen years trying to unearth information at her local library about Hicks and his clinic after spotting the information on her birth certificate, which illegally listed Jim and Joan as her parents. She made her first trip to McKaysville, followed by numerous others in 1988 when she was 23 after Jones' death from cancer. Before she died, Jones made her husband promise to tell Blasio everything. What she learned from her late adoptive father and more than 3 decades spent investigating Hicks in his clinic shocked and angered her. My parents bought a child in a way that gave me no option but to search and possibly find no answers. That's not love, that's desperation. Oh, imagine that. Imagine that, being found out you were sold as a baby. Wow. Scary. Very, very scary. Let's go back to NASA for a second. On June 25th, astronauts Shane Kimbrough and Thomas Pesquet successfully completed an almost a 7-hour extravehicular activity or spacewalk to install solar panels on the International Space Station. What does it take to don a spacesuit and venture out on such a technical and dangerous mission? Surprisingly, one of the main criteria, besides years of training, is body size. EVA capabilities blossomed during the era of NASA's space shuttle. Astronauts' rode robotic arms floated tetherless through the void using jetpacks to steer, corralled satellites by hand, and built the International Space Station. They've done it all while wearing space suits based on the design first developed for the Apollo missions in the 1960s. Each suit is a human-shaped spacecraft featuring a backpack that houses primary life support system, a layered pressurized outer garment to protect astronauts from the space environment, and a long john undergarment that circulates chilled water via tubes over the body to stop the astronauts from getting too hot inside their suits. When designing the next-gen spacesuits in 1974, NASA opted for a modular tuxedo approach in which various components, upper torso, lower torso, helmet, arms, and gloves, could be mixed and matched to fit individual astronauts. Those suits came in 5 sizes, from extra small to extra large. But, fast forward 47 years, and Kimbrough and Pesquet were wearing those exact same spacesuits while working on the ISS, despite the fact that the suits were only designed to last 15 years. These days, NASA spacesuits are less likely to be bespoke tailoring and more like remainder stock at an outlet mall. Of the 18 suits originally made by the Next Gen program, only 4 suits still remain. 4 were lost in the Challenger and Columbia disasters, and others came to an end of their working lives when weren't replaced. This also means to be selected for an ISS spacewalk, an astronaut must fit one of the 2 remaining available sizes, men's medium or men's large. Well, we know I'm out. I'm an XL. The first all-female EVA planned for March 2019 had to be postponed because only one medium-sized suit was available. Another medium suit was eventually cobbled together from spares, and astronaut Christina Koch and Jessica Meir successfully performed their groundbreaking spacewalk on October 18, 2019. However, is it time for new suits? Now, no one has died in an EVA, but there have been some close calls. The first ever spacewalk by Soviet cosmonaut Alexei Leonov in '65 almost ended in disaster when the expansion of his suit in the vacuum of space almost prevented him from re-entering the capsule. Now, and on July 16, 2013, Luca Parmitano entered the history books with 2 firsts: first Italian to perform a spacewalk, and the first near drowning in space. A week before his EVA, one of the water pipes in his spacesuit had sprung a leak, but this information was not passed up the chain of command, and mission controllers authorized his EVA to begin. Within an hour, Luca had almost 2 liters of water in his helmet, leaving him struggling to breathe, unable to see out of his visor or communicate with colleagues. Luca said he used his tether to navigate his way back to the safety of the airlock. No doubt he and other astronauts could use some new bodysuits, and especially bodysuits for women, since their bodies are a lot different than men's. Los Angeles potheads are crying tonight, bawling their eyes out after police seized more than 370,000 marijuana plants and harvested product with an estimated street value of $1 billion. The LA County Sheriff's Department said 131 people were arrested, 33 guns were taken in the 10-day operation in Antelope Valley, north of LA. In addition to the marijuana plants, More than 33,480 pounds of harvested hippie lettuce, or more than 16 tons, were also seized. As big as the effort involving hundreds of law enforcement officers, authorities reached only about 40% of the illegal grows officials identified, which highlighted their scope of the problem that officials said was leaked to organized drug trafficking groups. Hold on, I got a moth in here that's driving me nuts. Go away. Anyways, second week of the operation, the first week they had already tried rebuilding the grows. Sheriff Alex Villanueva said California voters legalized recreational pot use in 2016, and the first sales began legally in 2018. This is not a war on the legal cannabis business in California, said U.S. Representative Mike Garcia. The growers in the Antelope Valley, which is in the high desert area, have been stealing water from hydrants and using illegal wells, using toxic and banned chemicals and dumping them where they poison the environment, and some are armed. The area is home to protected species, including Mojave ground squirrels and desert tortoise in the iconic Joshua Tree area. Growers cut down the trees to make room for greenhouses, have blocked streams and polluted water with trash and pesticides, said Chloe Hakim, a biologist with the State Department of Fish and Wildlife. There's a lot of important critical species that are out there that need their habitat to thrive and survive. Officials shut down 205 of around 500 illegal grows that have been identified from the air, Villanueva said. The marijuana was destroyed. Of the arrests, 22 were on felony counts, but the rest were on misdemeanor allegations. The sheriff said the district attorney will make the charging decisions. Bad potters. Bad potters. A drawing of a bear's head by Leonardo da Vinci has sold for a record $12.1 million at a London auction. Measuring just 7 by 7 centimeters, head of a bear is more than 500 years old. The sale has surpassed the previous record for a Leonardo drawing set by Horse and Rider, which sold for about $11 million back in 2001. According to the Christie's auction house, which held the sale, it is among just a few drawings by the Italian Renaissance master which are still privately owned. The auction house did not reveal the identity of the buyers. However, it was sold to a single bid from a man and woman. The drawing was created using silver point on pale pink beige paper and is among a number of the artist's small-scale drawings of animals which date back to the early 1480s. Letitia Mason, an expert in old master drawings at Christie's, describes silver point as a very difficult technique because it doesn't really admit any mistake. It involves applying a silver stick to a specifically and specially prepared paper to leave marks and lines required delicate touch and pressure. Moth is back. And anyways, moving on. The sketch previously belonged to British painter and collector Sir Thomas Lawrence before being sold at Christie's in 1860 for £2.50. It's been included in a number of exhibitions, notably a major show in the National Gallery in London in 2011. Leonardo da Vinci, who was born in 1452, died in 1519, is famous for both his art and inventions. Very cool. Very cool. There it is. Got it. Screw you. There it is. Anyways, let's go to another story here. We'll go to this one. Florida man taking a walk on the beach found a 4-inch tooth from a prehistoric megalodon shark just 3 weeks after he found a smaller tooth from the same species on the same beach. Jacob Danner said he was walking on Fernandina Beach on Thursday morning after Tropical Storm Elsa swept through the area when he came across the tooth. Danner said he found the tooth where he had found a 3-inch megalodon tooth 3 weeks earlier. Yeah, imagine that. Just walking on the beach and finding megalodon teeth. Thought of the Dave happens every night at this time, where we ask a question on our Facebook and Twitter pages, then read your responses on the air because we love the audience participation around here. Today's Thought of the Dave is as follows. Your thoughts on people encountering prehistoric creatures. Lori, possibly there are places that humans have not been to or just passing through. Who knows, man still is discovering new species. Then some might be crossing over to parallel universes. John believes they're true. Lee does not. He says, are you sorrious? Sorrious. Yes. Danny, doubtful, more likely misidentified animals or yet discovered animals like Mokele babembe, most likely a type of large semi-aquatic lizard. Preston, isn't that a state of America called Florida? Davy, I think that they are all a result of time quakes. Kit Kat, but if we got the T-Rex arms wrong and they were actually wings, people, we'd have a dragon. Barry, whenever one deals with a lawyer or a politician, they're basically dealing with a megalodon shark. True. Danny, they may have watched too much Land of the Lost. Deb, I don't know. People have claimed to seeing pterodactyls throughout history. Everett, if people are encountering them, doesn't that, by the rules of grammar, make prehistoric an unqualified modifier? Do you even own a red pen anymore, Dave? Thanks, Everett. Josh, highly possible. We have yet to chart out the entire Earth. We haven't even explored a giant portion of our oceans. Penman, I would suggest that you wear camouflage clothes, carry a flamethrower, and take someone along that you can outrun when looking for prehistoric creatures, Dave. That's what I got Mark for. Michelle, one of our biggest fears, I keep a glass of water on my bedside table just in case. Clearly, the people who do encounter them didn't follow this surreptitious piece of advice from Jurassic Park and couldn't get away before their lives were changed forever by one sighting. Candace, I know 3 people, 2 of them personally. One was my cousin, and the third was a university professor I had lunch with, who each saw a pterodactyl in broad daylight. Unmistakable, undeniable pterodactyls, for real. My guess is that they crossed through a time portal. And Dave gets the final word. I petted a horseshoe crab once. It was lovely. Thank you to everybody participating in the Thought of the Dave. We will do it all again tomorrow. Thank you for everyone tuning us in for the SOR News Wire. And, of course, to Alex Mistretta coming on to talk Mokele babembe, pterodactyls, dinosaurs. Are they still around today? The mystery continues. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thal rocking in the background with Little Brother Is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thanks to everybody listening in at home, at work, in your cars, wherever you may be. Thank you to everyone listening in our chat rooms tonight. YouTube, Twitch, LGAB, Revolution Radio, Spreaker, Facebook, the Space Travelers Club, and on Twitter at hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Remember, this show is copyright by Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures Limited. Thank you so much for choosing to share your evening with us, because together, my friends,
we're watching.
We own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Yes, the Woo Train has docked for the night. But soon, my friends, we shall ride again. Your seats are always available. Your tickets never expire. And if you want to bring a friend, we've got room for them too. Good night.
Peacock fuels your true crime obsession with exclusive new originals. John Wayne Gacy, Devil in Disguise.
Clowns can get away with murder.
And Epstein's shadow, Ghislaine Maxwell.
She inherited Jeffrey Epstein's secrets.
Plus the most bingeable crime series, Snapped. Sign up now at peacocktv.com.
Okay, so there's something I need to say. The deals at Kohl's right now, so good. We're talking savings on the best summer stuff. I got kids' tops for under $15, $24.99 shorts I'll wear on repeat, and sandals for my husband for under $20. Did I mention the extra 20% off and getting Kohl's Cash? It was ready for pickup in less than an hour, too. Ah, summer and savings. My two favorite things. Select styles 20% offer ends July 11th. Some exclusions apply. See store or Kohl's.com for details.